Kundalini is the energy that everyone possesses, but it's usually dormant or not actively utilized. However, when you engage in proper practice, Kundalini awakens and rises through the energy channels within your spine, gathering at the crown of your head. This accumulation of Kundalini creates an incredibly blissful and pleasant sensation known as Amrita. When this system is fully activated, every stimulus and emotion transforms into pure joy. Life itself becomes an ecstatic experience, bringing you closer to enlightenment with a profound sense of joy. And that is what the ancient sages relentlessly pursued. Today, I'd like to dive deep into the intricacies of Kundalini Yoga, explaining the entire process and its essence. Firstly, these days globally popular yoga styles like Ashtanga Yoga and Power Yoga are derived from Hatha Yoga. Hatha Yoga involves physical movements such as poses and breathing techniques. In simpler terms, any yoga that includes these physical elements is classified as Hatha Yoga. This particular form of yoga is relatively new, emerging in the last millennium, specifically since the 10th century. Let me take a moment to provide you with a brief historical overview. Before the birth of Buddha, India was known for its religious practices revolving around rituals where people sought blessings from the god. However, around 500 BC, Buddha emerged, and at approximately the same time, the founders of Jainism, Socrates in Greece, and Confucius in China appeared. Concurrently, numerous great saints surfaced during that era, advocating for self-development and the elevation of the soul, surpassing simple prayer-based rituals. While Buddhism continued to evolve, the initial stages of yoga, known as Raja Yoga, centered around Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. This particular yoga style emphasizes spiritual concentration, much like Zen meditation. The ultimate aim is to attain the ultimate truth, paying little attention to life's trivialities. Originally, both Buddhism and yoga emphasized meditation, with a strong focus on self-concentration, aiming to reach the highest state of consciousness. However, due to the inherent flaws of human nature, it became increasingly challenging for individuals to awaken solely through meditation-centered training. Consequently, sitting in meditation was no longer sufficient, and various techniques were developed. This gave rise to different types of yoga. Bhakti Yoga evolved in a religious direction, while Jnana Yoga developed in a philosophical context. A third type of yoga, focusing on the body and harnessing its functions and energy, found a way to address these aspects. That's where Hatha Yoga comes into play. Now, what about Kundalini Yoga? Kundalini Yoga is essentially a matter of words, a method of attaining liberation through Kundalini energy. It's named Kundalini Yoga, but there wasn't a distinct Kundalini Yoga sect. The sect was Hatha Yoga. What does that mean? They sought self-improvement by directing their attention towards the body's channels, life energy, and Kundalini energy. To achieve this, they began with asanas, then proceeded to breathing techniques, mudras, and finally, meditation. This constitutes the system of Hatha Yoga. Among the physical yogas known as Hatha Yoga, the more advanced part that delves into the energy called Kundalini might be referred to as Kundalini Yoga. This form of yoga is practiced as Tummo or heat yoga in Tibetan Buddhism in Tibet and as Xiandao in China, albeit with slight variations in names and systems. Despite these distinctions, the underlying idea remains the same. A 1,000-year-old method passed down through generations in India, Tibet, and China, enabling individuals to awaken through energy. Let's consider this entire approach collectively as Kundalini Yoga. In other words, all the yoga styles gaining popularity worldwide today can be seen as streams stemming from Kundalini Yoga. However, there's a profound depth to the essence of Kundalini Yoga. While what's currently being widely practiced around the world serves as a preparatory exercise for it, and we refer to it simply as yoga. So, what exactly is this authentic Kundalini Yoga? I'll delve into that in detail in my next explanation. In my opinion, Kundalini Yoga is an essential yoga practice for individuals in the modern world. With the diverse range of yoga practices available today, it's important to approach it from multiple angles. That means embracing Jnana Yoga to gain knowledge and analyze teachings, Bhakti Yoga to cultivate love for the divine, Karma Yoga to treat life as a dedicated practice and confront our present actions, and also drawing inspiration from Buddhist teachings. Kundalini Yoga, or Hatha Yoga as it's also known, starts with the body. It utilizes the body's systems to enhance spirituality and nourish the soul. It's a beginner-friendly approach. Simply put, Jnana Yoga requires intelligence, while Bhakti Yoga requires a pure heart. However, Kundalini Yoga is all about starting by doing. You simply need to move your body, practice breathwork, and do what needs to be done. As you progress, additional elements come into play, but anyone can start. Even if you're not seeking enlightenment or lofty goals, practicing Kundalini Yoga can bring benefits like purifying your respiratory system, improving health, finding emotional stability, and unlocking individual abilities through the opening of chakras. So, even if enlightenment isn't your primary aim, dedicating yourself to Kundalini Yoga will undoubtedly lead to a fulfilling life. It's important to consider that the modern era is filled with physical and energetic impurities. With a large population and sinking levels of compassion, it's a busy time where physical well-being quickly deteriorates amid constant interactions. That's why Kundalini Yoga becomes crucial as a means to protect ourselves from the negative aspects of this age. The process of Kundalini awakening can occur through various practices. Even by solely engaging in Bhakti Yoga, such as singing devotional songs or shedding tears, the Kundalini can awaken. Similarly, practices like Jnana Yoga, Raja Yoga, or Buddhist meditation focusing on contemplation and mental concentration can also progress the Kundalini process. However, Kundalini Yoga specifically emphasizes the Kundalini itself. It suggests the idea of not simply waiting for the eventual results, but rather seizing the energy itself and setting it in motion. To achieve this, the physical body is utilized. Previous practices, be it within Buddhism or the teachings of Raja Yoga represented by the Yoga Sutras, tended to negate the significance of the physical body. Therefore, they emphasized detachment from the physical body and its limitations. This was the primitive teaching. However, in Kundalini Yoga, there is a pause, and it acknowledges that the physical body is indeed nothing more than a vehicle for the soul. Nevertheless, since we are associated with it during our lifetime, it suggests making use of it in reverse. If we cling to the belief that our physical body is our true self, we get trapped in the cycle of reincarnation. However, for example, since my mind and body are connected, by controlling the body, such as by regulating breathing, the mind also seems to calm down. As the physical body is interconnected with the mind, we have come to realize that by utilizing the body effectively, we can achieve things that were difficult when solely dealing with the mind. In other words, depending on how we utilize the flow of energy, the channel system, or the chakras, the physical body can be beneficial for the improvement of the mind and soul. This is how Kundalini Yoga and Hatha Yoga have developed. The popular forms of yoga today are an extension of these ideas. Originally, yogis in India sought liberation. However, even if one does not aim for such an ultimate state, practicing yoga moderately can contribute to both physical well-being and mental stability. This resonated positively and spread as a health and beauty method in Western countries and elsewhere. To begin, the energy known as Kundalini is essentially rooted in virtue. Virtue, in simpler terms, refers to good karma or having positive potential. Therefore, diligently accumulating virtue is crucial. At the same time, one must uphold moral principles because breaking them unintentionally diminishes virtue. So when approaching Kundalini Yoga from a physical perspective, it's important to first accumulate energy, which requires both virtue and adherence to moral principles. Now, virtue is not some abstract concept. It's like money. For instance, if you want to buy a luxury car worth 10 million, you naturally need to save up 10 million. Saving that amount means refraining from excessive spending on other things. In other words, even if someone says, I want to buy a luxury car, but they dine at expensive restaurants daily and spend most of their salary on leisure, their desire won't come to fruition. So, achieving significant goals often requires restraining ourselves a bit when it comes to smaller pleasures. It's not a moral lecture, it's simply a practical discussion. To attain Kundalini awakening, ascent, or enlightenment, all these extraordinary accomplishments, considerable virtue is undoubtedly necessary. It demands a vast amount of virtue. However, this aspect is seldom emphasized in contemporary times. The significance of virtue is often overlooked. Many esoteric texts, like those in Taoism, Yoga, and Tantra, mention the tremendous ecstasy that arises when energy awakens, ascends, and circulates within the body. But many individuals struggle even to achieve the initial stage of circulation, and among those who succeed, they often don't experience pleasure. Why is that? Is something amiss? The answer lies in the absence of virtue. Hence, virtue plays a vital role. Since virtue doesn't have a tangible form, it can be challenging to grasp. Simply put, virtue is synonymous with good karma. Therefore, the key is to bring happiness to others. Karma, in its simplest form, is the law of cause and effect. When a force is exerted on something, an equal and opposite force is generated, resulting in a phenomenon that moves in the completely opposite direction with the same magnitude and force. This law exists not only in physics but also in all aspects of life. It's essentially the law of karma. It means that if you bring happiness to someone, you'll also find happiness for yourself. If you cause unhappiness, you'll experience unhappiness as well. However, when you bring happiness to someone, it doesn't instantly come back to you. For example, if I give money to a person in need, I won't immediately become wealthy myself. There's a time lag for it to come back. During that time, it's stored somewhere. This stored energy is what we call the energy of virtue. It brings about a sense of tranquility, happiness, and peace of mind, even though it's not entirely clear how. On the flip side, the accumulation of negative actions, those things we've done wrong but haven't faced the consequences for, makes us feel anxious, troubled, and lonely, even though it's not entirely clear why. Our stockpile of karma is mixed, so sometimes we feel lonely and other times we feel happy. In yoga and Buddhism, the definitions of good and evil are based on the law of karma. Doing actions that lead to happiness is considered good, while engaging in acts that cause suffering and unhappiness is labeled as evil. But it's not just about surface-level judgments. For instance, if someone deceives others to make money, it might seem like they're gaining happiness on the surface. However, according to karma, that person will eventually have to experience the suffering of being deceived themselves. So, in this sense, the act of deceiving others is not merely a matter of morality. It's not like society is saying you must not deceive people as a moral code. It's more like, by deceiving others, you will face consequences that outweigh the small benefits you gain now, many times over in the future. That's why it's considered evil. On the other hand, even though it may seem like you're at a loss at first by performing certain actions, your soul will experience tremendous happiness in this life and the afterlife. That's why such actions are deemed good. So, you see, good and evil are actually quite flexible concepts. The same goes for rules and precepts. They might seem rigidly defined, but they are more like general guidelines that are meant to apply to everyone, finding the common ground. In reality, the notions of good and evil can be understood in a more nuanced and adaptable way. The key is to keep increasing our stock of virtue. We shouldn't waste virtue on trivial matters. Conversely, we should try not to accumulate new stock of negative actions. In other words, we should refrain from doing bad things and causing unhappiness to others. If we already have negative karma, it's better to release it quickly. How can we release it? By confessing or purifying our hearts through practice, we realistically encounter various hardships. By experiencing these difficulties, our stock of negative karma diminishes a little. However, we must be cautious because if our hearts get stirred up again when faced with hardship, new negative karma will accumulate. For example, if you mocked someone in the past and they retaliated, normally that should be the end of it. But typically anger arises at that point. This becomes new negative karma. Therefore, we shouldn't let our hearts be stirred up. By saying, "Thank you for purifying my wrongdoing," it disappears, and in return we become a little happier. Unfortunately, because humans are unaware of this mechanism, they superficially try to escape suffering. For instance, when they encounter something painful, they try to run away from it. Alternatively, they may hold grudges and try to sustain themselves, but that's counterproductive. The more they engage in such actions, the more suffering they accumulate. On the other hand, if they perceive it as their own karma and endure it without allowing their hearts to be stirred up, then it diminishes. It may be painful in the moment, but afterward they have a happier state of mind than before. This is the law of actions and their consequences. So the concept of virtue as a physical energy and its connection to the source of Kundalini is what this discussion is all about. As I mentioned earlier, virtue is the energy that brings happiness. However, the question arises, what is happiness? Well, one way to describe it is the manifestation of our desires. In other words, virtue can be seen as the energy that allows us to fulfill our desires. So, just like I mentioned before, it is closely akin to money. With virtue, one can do anything. Just as money can be spent on trivial matters as well as valuable ones, virtue can be applied to everything from trivial to valuable matters. Now, the most significant leakage of virtue occurs through sexual release. For men, it is precisely ejaculation. As for women, it is less obvious thing, so it's hard to say. However, even if one believes they haven't leaked any semen, it's possible for seminal fluid to be released unknowingly while entertaining sexual thoughts. It may mix with urine and be expelled without one's awareness, resulting in the leakage of energy. Hence, distancing oneself from sexual matters becomes immensely important. This is what is commonly known as abstinence, brahmacharya. In fact, athletes practice abstinence before important competitions. They understand this from experience. It's not only about physical power, but also about the power to accomplish things. This virtue encompasses more than simple physical energy. Losing this virtue means being unable to achieve greater things. Moreover, consider this. Male sperm, often referred to as sexual energy, and female eggs. These elements together create a human being. It shows the tremendous energy and vitality contained within them. Therefore, on the contrary, ejaculation means releasing an enormous number of sperm, each of which carries the potential to create an entire human being. It's an immense wastage to discard such a reservoir of life force. Instead, it can be sublimated internally, transformed into a different form. And here's the tricky part. When it comes to guys, sexual pleasure happens when semen gets moving. When the built-up semen in the testicles wants to be expelled through the urethra due to some sexual stimulation, it brings about a pleasurable sensation. But this idea can be a little puzzling. Why does movement alone lead to pleasure? Basically, it's because there's a concentration of ecstatic energy within the sperm, or what we commonly call semen. It's like the energy of virtue. I want you to approach this subject with an open mind. So, what exactly is virtue? It's the energy that brings us happiness. Among all the ways this energy manifests, semen represents the most basic form. That's why its release brings pleasure, but it presents our invaluable treasure in the simplest way possible. Let's say each of you acquired a diamond. You'd go, wow, a diamond, and be amazed. But it would be like buying 10 million bags of snacks. But there's potential for something better. It's praiseworthy to use the power of virtue to experience sexual ecstasy. Yet, if we were to direct that same energy towards sublimation, it would lead to an even more delightful experience. And it's not only for pleasure, it boosts wisdom, nurtures growth, and opens doors to more possibilities. The joy derived from spiritual practice is boundless, as it doesn't diminish but rather intensifies within us over time. However, in sexual matters, it fades away and that's the end of it. So we should shift our focus to the ascent of Kundalini, which is a sacred path running through the center of our spine, rather than the path from the testicles to the genitalia that relates to sexual matters. When Kundalini, refined and transformed, ascends through this sacred path, the system remains the same. The distinction lies in semen becoming sublime Kundalini, journeying along the sacred path, evoking a profound and holier ecstasy. To wake up and rise Kundalini, practicing abstinence becomes super important. At first, it might take some strong self-restraint, but once the system is firmly established, there's no need for that kind of effort anymore. In the past, the respected monks seriously followed rules, trying their best to minimize sexual desires, but let's be real, it was tough for them because those desires kept nagging at them. However, with diligent Kundalini yoga practice and proper development, you can avoid enduring endless patience. The path of spiritual practice naturally generates heat, and this heat comes from the lower abdomen. Male testicles are located outside the body to keep the semen cool. In other words, the heat kills the sperm, so heating up the lower abdomen is like destroying sperm. The slain sperm is then absorbed by the body. On a physical level, it's assimilated as amino acids or proteins. But on a deeper level, the energy of virtue, which initially resides in the raw form of semen, is absorbed and transformed into a more primal conglomerate of virtue. If left unattended, it'll eventually become sperm again. But instead, when it dies and returns to its original essence, it gets propelled upwards by the ascending energy. In this process, it transforms into Kundalini. And once the system is firmly established like that, there's no requirement to push through such struggles. However, until its full development, patience is essential. Additionally, the term enlightenment mind comes from the Sanskrit word bodhicitta, and in the world of esoteric practices like Tantra, it carries deep and diverse meanings. Firstly, it represents the commitment of Mahayana Buddhism to attain enlightenment to free all beings. Secondly, it can refer to the enlightened mind that's inherent in our own nature. We call this intrinsic bodhicitta. However, in certain tantric teachings, bodhicitta is used to represent semen, but it's important to understand that this usage doesn't just mean semen itself. It refers to the pure energy contained within semen. The correct use of this term holds great significance. What I'm trying to say is that ejaculating means letting go of bodhicitta. When we ejaculate, we're discarding the seed of compassion within us. That's why sexual abstinence becomes necessary. Now let's move on to meals. I don't want to be too strict about it, but it's crucial to be mindful of overeating. When we eat more food than our bodies actually need, it ends up being a waste of energy. Our bodies have to use up extra energy for digestion, which results in energy loss, so we should be careful not to overeat. Yet the extent of overeating hinges on one's digestion ability, hindering a universal directive. As a reference, it's advised to pursue moderate consumption, often termed eating until around 60 to 70% full. Additionally, talking excessively should be noted. Conversing can deplete much energy. Remember, negative remarks or lies amass undesirable negative karma. Therefore, while complete silence isn't necessary, it's advisable to control our speech. We should actively participate in conversations that contribute to the well-being of others, others, while minimizing unnecessary and idle chatter as much as possible. Furthermore, there's another factor to take into account: thinking. The mind consumes a considerable amount of energy. Of course, engaging in thoughtful reflection and pondering teachings can be advantageous, as it brings about positive changes within oneself. However, when we get caught up in unnecessary worries, anxieties, and wandering thoughts, it becomes a drain on our vitality. Moreover, anger represents the least virtuous expression. When anger consumes us, our aim is to harm others emotionally and diminish their spirits. It's a misguided attempt at virtue's power, but ultimately depletes our own energy. Anger undeniably drains our virtue's reserve. Without energy, we couldn't have such intense outbursts. Energy fuels thoughts like "this scoundrel." However, this is the most useless way to use energy, helping no one. It's like wasting energy on sexual indulgence, but worse, as it brings no joy. It may create an illusion of satisfaction, a fleeting sense of relief, but in reality, both the aggressor and the recipient experience increased discomfort. Let's be realistic here. Not only does anger make us disliked by others, but it also intensifies feelings of hostility, guilt, and remorse within ourselves. Hence, anger is the most destructive of emotions. While it's understandable that everyone has desires and attachments, it is crucial to swiftly eradicate anger from within. Resentment, hatred, and anger, these feelings bring only negativity, harming both oneself and others. Releasing anger is often seen as beneficial, but that is a fallacy. Exercising self-restraint is superior. Why? Because it cultivates a habit. Once you get angry once, it's easier to get angry again. So it's better not to get angry, even if stress piles up. Hence, regular compassion training and disciplined mind cultivation are vital. They prevent energy waste on anger, hatred, and similar emotions. Additionally, there are several other factors worth considering. For example, the anus. In infants and children, it's tightly closed, gradually relaxing with age, and in the elderly, it's consistently relaxed. What does this indicate? During our youthful years, it's natural to experience growth, and we must conserve our energy. As we mature, the need for conservation decreases, leading to a gradual loosening. When it comes to accumulating energy through spiritual practices, one may unknowingly experience energy loss through the anus. To counteract this, practice exercises that alternate anus contractions, mindfulness of its state, and use mudras or bandhas in spiritual sessions. These methods effectively prevent energy depletion. What I just mentioned is a really important principle, but it goes beyond that. Whether we look at Buddhism's 5 precepts or the guidelines and suggestions in yoga from the standpoint of Kundalini, the main objective is to prevent unnecessary energy loss and, on the flip side, to avoid accumulating harmful energies, negative karma, that hinder spiritual growth. That's why it's crucial to faithfully follow these guidelines. By doing so, we can fill ourselves with the incredible energy of virtue. As you go through this process, you'll reach a point where stress starts to build up. This stress is caused by the fact that our bodies have these energy channels called nadis, which should ideally be flowing smoothly. However, various factors can throw these nadis off balance. One factor is karma, which stems from our past experiences and influences our mental inclinations. Another factor is our thoughts and concepts. Depending on the kind of ideas we hold on to, certain parts of the energy channels can get blocked. Usually it's the negative concepts that do the blocking. For example, when faced with a situation, we might think, "I can't help but feel jealous," or "I can't help but hate that person." These negative thoughts create blockages. So how these blockages form and how energy flows easily or gets obstructed determines a person's character, thoughts, limitations, and suffering. Another way to look at these energy channels is through our worldview. For instance, if we have strong sexual desires like "I want to possess this type of person" or "I want to engage in this kind of sexual activity," it creates blockages in that area. Likewise, excessive attachment to food, money, or possessions causes blockages around the navel. Everything is interconnected. You can think of it as concepts or karma. In other words, negative thoughts in our minds or negative actions we've done in the past generate the flow of negative energy, leading to blockages in the nadis. On the flip side, virtuous actions and a virtuous mindset allow positive energy to flow, purifying the energy channels. That's why we learn teachings and precepts like "I shouldn't hate others," "I shouldn't lie," "I shouldn't harbor evil thoughts." These teachings gradually tighten things up from the lower part. This relates to the chakras, but I'll briefly touch upon them since they'll be discussed later. The first chakra, the Muladhara chakra, located at the base, is connected to anger, aversion, and hatred. Then comes the second chakra, the Swadhisthana chakra, which deals with sexual desires and attachments. Lastly, the Manipura chakra in the abdomen is linked to greed, so things tighten up gradually from the lower part. Let me break it down for you. Avoid succumbing to anger, getting entangled in sexual desire, and being consumed by greed. When you follow these teachings, the energy within you rises and can't come back down. These teachings are like rules and guidelines that everyone learns and tries to live by. But here's the thing. As you learn teachings and strive to live by them, stress gradually accumulates. Diligently following precepts, building virtues, and practicing lead to an energy buildup like a balloon filling to capacity. It can be a bit overwhelming at first. Some people get irritated and others find themselves overwhelmed by uncontrollable desires. It's a phase that happens when you're filled to the brim with virtue. At this point, people release built-up stress through fun or venting on others, letting out their anger and loosing their energy. It might give a temporary relief to the mind, but it's actually a huge waste. After putting in so much effort to accumulate all that energy, it quickly dissipates, hindering the great progress that lies ahead. The mind might feel relieved, but it's truly unfortunate. The idea that venting helps to alleviate stress is just a common misconception. Even regular folks who aren't into spirituality experience stress buildup, but the reasons for that are different. Think of it like your own personal world. That world has a fixed size. As mentioned before, practitioners keep accumulating energy within that limited space, so the energy keeps expanding and they end up feeling brimming. That's the stress state for a practitioner. On the other hand, ordinary people don't follow these practices, so why do they also feel overwhelmed with stress? It's because they accumulate negative karma day after day, which clogs up their space. In essence, it's not about increasing energy, it's their space narrowing, creating a brimming sensation. If this cycle persists, their world shrinks and energy wanes as life progresses. So let's dive into it. For those practitioners who are filled to the brim, it's important to clear those blocked pathways. This way, they can create more space and expand the realm within their hearts. This situation enables higher energy channels to open, gradually leading to elevated realms. Now, how can they clear those congested pathways when they want to ascend? First, they need to break through the negative ideas that are holding them back. This requires some self-analysis guided by the teachings. It might be easier for some people than others, but it's not necessarily a difficult task. They need to thoroughly study and put the teachings into practice, applying them to their own challenges and current issues, freeing themselves with their guidance. Let's say, for example, they have a strong aversion towards someone, feeling like they can't love that person anymore and harboring intense hatred. As per teachings, this mindset is unacceptable, so they need to really dive into the teachings, confront their feelings, and work through them repeatedly until they finally experience a sudden liberation. Oh right, what was I thinking? It's all about love. On the other hand, by deeply internalizing the teachings, there are instances where they may experience sudden liberation without even remembering the thought process clearly. That's another approach. Now, building upon this foundation, they incorporate physical practices to guide the energy upwards through the higher pathways. So purification is possible from either direction. In other words, if you gradually let go of concepts in your everyday life, your channels get a bit purified. Practicing mudras also aids purification, so dual approach accelerates progress. Releasing attachments and notions daily combined with physical practices swiftly purifies channels. Essentially, it's teachings, practices, and real-life application, which, when these three aspects are integrated effectively, our channels undergo rapid purification. So it's a bit broadening the topic, but getting back on track, the initial step is to strengthen the energy firmly, ensuring it doesn't leak. That's the primary process. There's a lot of talk going around that generally portrays Kundalini as something dangerous. You might have heard of Kundalini Syndrome online or in books. They caution against reckless Kundalini Yoga practice due to its potential for mental disorders. But let me tell you, that's not really the case. First and foremost, I think many of those who talk about Kundalini Syndrome in general have misunderstood the concept. I believe it's simply a matter of nerve-related issues. Even if Kundalini were to truly awaken, it's not inherently dangerous. In fact, if it were possible, it should awaken in all of humanity, raising our energy levels. So why is it considered dangerous? It all comes down to what I just mentioned, lack of proper guidance. The various psychological or phenomenological problems that may arise when attempting to channel the energy physically are often left unaddressed because there's no proper guidance available. However, if all of this is approached with proper instruction, there wouldn't be any issues at all. Another way to avoid problems is by having a teacher. Moreover, if there's a strong devotion to God, there won't be any issues either. Another alternative is practicing compassion towards others, making the four immeasurables the focal point point of your spiritual practice. So the problem lies in being self-centered, for example, not having a teacher, or even if you have one, not following their advice, lacking faith in God, or not showing compassion and love towards others. Well, the truth is, there are quite a few practitioners out there who fit this description. In other words, they enjoy the practice and find it romantic, but their sole focus is on liberation. They have no interest in trusting anyone, believing in God, showing compassion, or loving others. That kind of mindset can be a little dangerous. However, if one not only engages in the practice, but also learns the correct teachings, cultivates mindfulness and wisdom daily to purify the mind, and embraces devotion to God along with compassion towards others, then things should be mostly fine. And in the next step, originally we all have what's called the flow of energy. There are pathways throughout the body, and the energy flows through them. But when you enter the realm of Kundalini Yoga, a special energy channel called the Sushumna comes into play. It runs along the spine and isn't typically used by ordinary folks. Physically explaining it is hard, but let's try an analogy. Picture a really thin tube. Only pure liquid can pass through it. Impure substances can't. That's the idea. Our energy is too impure to flow through that special channel, so we accumulate virtue, increase positive energy, and refine it through practice. Simply put, you've done something good. Your good deeds have increased positive energy. This virtue, this positive energy is what brings us happiness. But here's the thing. The virtue accumulated by everyone, like through good deeds, is rough virtue, rough energy that doesn't flow through the Sushumna. It's not usable as it is. However, this rough energy can still be used for worldly happiness. So when you accumulate virtue, happiness naturally follows. You might become wealthy, liked by people, find a romantic partner, or experience such things on your spiritual journey. Your thoughts may manifest to some extent. Now that's risky. It means the accumulated virtue gets watered down by manifesting as rough phenomena. You intended to use it for your practice, but it becomes unusable. But let me reiterate, as it is, it's unusable. So somehow that rough energy needs to be transformed into a subtle and refined virtue that can pass through the Sushumna. That's what we call practice. By accumulating virtue, practicing mudras, breathing exercises, and meditation, it becomes somewhat usable. And that's often referred to as refining the energy. For instance, in yoga, practices like kumbhaka and bandhas involve refining the energy by holding the breath using specific techniques. In our bodies, there are 5 types of energy: apana, samana, prana, udana, and vyana. They flow through the energy channels. Apana covers the area from the genitals to the feet. Before Kundalini truly awakens and rises, apana rises first. It governs excretion, like eliminating waste products through digestion, excreting them as urine or feces, and also includes sweat and toxin elimination. And this apana resides in the lower abdomen and extends down to the legs. Typically it seems to flow downward, but it reverses its course and begins to ascend. This process serves as preparation to purify the pathway that Kundalini must ascend in the near future. At this point, some people may mistake the sensation of ascension or the feeling of the facial surface being purified as Kundalini, but it's actually apana energy. Many people often confuse apana energy with Kundalini. In reality, it's just apana energy rising, but they may mistakenly believe Kundalini is rising like a gust of wind. However, it's actually apana energy. It's a positive development, but still in the preparatory stage, and the area around the abdomen is samana. It's related to digestion and the fire element. The chest area is prana. Prana spreads life force throughout the body and is related to breath. And around the head is udana. Udana is a crucial energy in yogic practice. It's the uplifting energy. When udana gets stronger, the body feels lighter, while stronger apana makes the body feel heavier. Strengthening udana brings a noticeable sense of lightness to both the mind and body. Vyana, on the other hand, is the pervasive energy that envelops the entire body. Now, the refining of energy I mentioned earlier refers primarily to apana, samana, and prana, which are mainly used for excretion, digestion, and breath. Normally, these energies are only used for everyday bodily functions, but through the practice of bandhas and kumbhaka, they're combined and transformed into a special and exquisite energy, like alchemy. By firmly applying the anal bandha, apana energy is directed upward. Engaging the abdominal bandha causes samana energy to rise as well. And activating the throat bandha compresses and holds prana energy downward. This compression creates pressure, leading to the formation of a distinct condensed energy body. So when performing bandhas or mudras, it's crucial not to do them haphazardly but with forceful tightening. Though it may feel challenging and uncomfortable, it's within this discomfort that energy condenses. Through this condensation, another energy body manages to ascend through the energy channels. That's the ideal outcome, but it's not easily achieved. If everyone could reach this ideal state, many would have mastered Kundalini Yoga. However, it remains quite elusive, in other words, transforming our inherent energy into a sublime and delicate form that can enter the Sushumna is indeed difficult. It suggests limitations to our own efforts, and that's where Bhakti, devotion, comes into play. Bhakti Yoga and Kundalini Yoga have a strong connection, but if we dig deeper, we realize that Kundalini Yoga isn't possible without Bhakti Yoga unless you're exceptionally gifted. So, even if we try to pursue Kundalini Yoga purely as a physical system, we'll inevitably face obstacles. The crux lies in Bhakti, the state of surrender and unwavering faith that opens the door for divine grace to descend. That's what it's all about. Divine grace has come down. Our inherent energy merges with the incoming energy, but further blending is necessary. And that's where practice comes into play. It complements the previous process of accumulating virtue and refining ourselves. However, achieving optimal results solely through our own efforts is challenging. To illustrate this, I've used the analogy of wheat flour. We can knead the flour we have, but it's of lower quality, resulting in unsatisfactory noodles. So we seek a small portion of exceptional wheat flour from someone else. Yet it becomes clear that the flour we have and the flour we received are different in quality. They can't be used as they are. Therefore, we must blend them. Through this blending, we transform the energy into a usable form. Skillful blending requires the practice and refinement of energy. Through diligent practice, refining the energy, refining it over and over again, and then blending it with the energy received, even though there are still impurities, it barely manages to flow. This signifies the culmination of preparation, allowing us to embark on the true path of Kundalini Yoga. Next, let's dive into the topic of chakras. Chakras aren't some extraordinary or separate entities within us. Instead, our bodies are basically made up of nadis, or energy channels. In Eastern philosophies like those in India and China, the human body isn't seen from a Western anatomical viewpoint, but rather as a network of energy channels, sort of like a bunch of pipes. These energy channels aren't just abstract concepts, they're actually real. As you progress in your practice, you'll personally experience them. Just like blood vessels carry blood, these channels permeate throughout the body in countless ways. However, they aren't unregulated. Similar to how arteries and veins branch out from the heart to different parts of the body, there's a central point for the energy channels called chakras. Basically, chakras are the focal points where these energy channels come together. So everyone uses these energy channels as they flow through their bodies, carrying out essential life functions. It's crucial to understand that the world we live in is invisible, so one must be careful because there are many different perspectives and teachings about chakras. For example, personally, I don't put much emphasis on specific colors associated with chakras because, truth be told, they can vary among individuals. While there are general principles, the experience of perceiving a particular color at a certain stage can vary significantly based on one's thoughts and personal challenges. Therefore, it's generally a good idea to seek guidance from a qualified and experienced teacher during your practice, especially when it comes to Kundalini. Otherwise, the teachings might get distorted or biased. Let's begin with the Muladhara chakra. It is located between the anus and the genitals, specifically in the perineum area. Here, Kundalini is depicted as a serpent coiled 3.5 times. This chakra is related to the elements that constitute the human body. These elements are known as earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Earth represents solid elements, in other words, the physical body. Water represents liquids such as blood, lymph, and other bodily fluids. Fire represents body temperature and heat energy. Air represents the life energy known as prana. Ether represents the cavities like the nostrils and the oral cavity. Similar to the 3 states of matter in chemistry, where a solid turns into a liquid with increased energy, then burns and transforms into plasma, and finally changes into gas, the internal structure of the human body also undergoes changes. Muladhara is associated with the earthly realm. It is believed that behind everything considered solid or material, there exists a substantial entity called the earth element. The earth element governs the state of all solid matter in the universe. When we refer to the earth element in the human body, we mean substances like flesh, bones, and skin, the material and solid aspects. All these are related to Muladhara. Therefore, when Muladhara is activated and purified, the body becomes beautiful or healthy. So, it is somewhat correct to say that practicing yoga leads to health. It has 2 meanings. Firstly, by practicing yoga, for example, the body becomes more flexible, the cardiovascular system improves, and the nadis open up, leading to physical health. Secondly, as Muladhara chakra is the first to develop, it governs health. In that sense, practicing yoga also contributes to well-being. And this chakra is associated with the world of hell, or the realm of afflictions, including anger, aversion, and hatred. Moreover, the attachment to the physical body, called upadana in Buddhism, is also related to Muladhara. While attachment to the physical body may not seem as negative as anger, it is indeed very detrimental in various ways. And we have internal senses and external senses. Internal senses are closer to the truth. Our desires for external gratification, such as wanting to eat delicious food or satisfy various sensations, are illusory senses. More refined senses lie dormant within us. These senses awaken through practice, and experiencing the internal senses indicates the opening of a chakra. Whether it is considered good or bad depends on its nature. In the case of a negative manifestation, the chakra is open but impure. In the case of a positive manifestation, it is open and purified. This chakra is related to the sense of smell. Those who are captivated by scents can be said to be caught up in Muladhara. They are highly sensitive to smells and easily attached to them. When Muladhara is activated but still impure, a slightly burnt or unpleasant odor may be perceived. However, this does not occur in reality. It is an internal scent. When Muladhara is activated and sufficiently purified, a pleasant fragrance is experienced. This is the realm of Muladhara chakra. Moving on, let's talk about the second chakra, Swadhisthana chakra. This chakra is linked to the animal realm in the world. It represents desires like sexual desire, laziness, escapism, compromise, and also encompasses desires for love, romantic emotions, and doubt. When this chakra is truly activated and energized, one becomes attractive to the opposite sex but disliked by the same sex. People of this type emit vibrational frequencies in all chakras, which are sensed by those around them, shaping the impressions they make. So, individuals with a strong vibrational frequency in Swadhisthana chakra possess a strong sexual allure. For instance, some people aren't drop-dead gorgeous, but they still manage to charm the guys. This phenomenon is due to the power of Swadhisthana chakra. Moreover, this chakra is also associated with the vitality of life and is simultaneously connected to the element of water. Water, despite being a liquid, makes up about 60 to 70% of the human body. The human body is primarily composed of the water element. Therefore, activating the water element within us contributes to our well-being and a vibrant state of being. To initially attain good health, one should activate the earth and water elements. The next element, fire, is also related to this. Fire represents the energy of warmth. However, activating the earth and water elements alone can lead to improved health. Fear and sexual energy are intertwined. The sexual energy we utilize during ejaculation is also the energy that enables us to remain fearless and composed. Losing this energy causes us to become hesitant and fearful. Thus, individuals who continually expend their energy on sexual matters tend to be timid. Various anxieties and fears arise in response to many things. On the flip side, individuals who have firmly conserved their sexual energy exhibit great composure. They have fewer anxieties and fears about various matters. So, if one seeks a steadfast mind, practicing abstinence is advisable, and this realm is closely linked to the sense of taste but distinct from being a gourmet or pursuing exquisite tastes. This chakra is for those obsessed with taste, and overeating without restraint relates to Manipura chakra, located around the stomach, while being captivated by taste indicates blockages in Swadhisthana chakra. As this chakra develops, one's mouth begins to perceive sweetness without consuming anything. Initially, impurities are present, and as Swadhisthana becomes activated, the mouth experiences bitterness, symbolizing the internal taste sensation. That's the realm of Swadhisthana chakra. And then there's the Manipura chakra in the abdomen. In terms of realms, this connects to the world of hungry ghosts. This chakra is associated with the affliction of greed. People who are stuck here are often fixated on food. Rather than just taste, as mentioned earlier, they're attached to food itself, or they might be hung up on material desires. Some are obsessed with money, while others are drawn to cars, precious metals, or other material possessions. There's also a form of greed related to learning, a thirst for knowledge or information, if you will. The desire to absorb all sorts of information falls into this realm as well. This also includes religions or spiritual practices focused on worldly benefits. Using spiritual or psychic powers for material gain is entirely within the realm of hungry ghosts. Things like using spiritual forces to fulfill wishes or to get married, or methods to attract unlimited wealth. That's all hungry ghost territory. In other words, when spiritual matters and greed align, you enter the realm of hungry ghosts. In terms of elements, this chakra is associated with fire. At this stage, it's as if a flame ignites in your belly. When this fire element flares up, one can become an insatiable glutton. It's unstoppable. I remember times when I'd eat 7 or 8 meals a day. At this stage, you'll find it hard to sleep. During my most energetic period, I could only sleep for about an hour. You're just incredibly energetic. There's a sense of boundless energy overflowing throughout your body. However, if you refrain from eating during this time, your spiritual practice can advance significantly. In hindsight, I should have eaten less. Everyone should be careful about this, especially young people. If you start spiritual practice and suddenly feel extremely hungry, even if you experience intense hunger, it's okay to eat normally, but try not to overeat. If you continue your practice without overeating, you'll quickly move to the next stage. Wind. Essentially, you need to burn through this fire element to transition to wind. But if you use that fire for digesting food, it becomes difficult to make that transition from fire to wind. When you do move on to wind, you'll still be full of energy, but it becomes quieter. You'll feel more content, but during this fire stage, your body is truly enveloped in burning energy. As this chakra develops, you may gain the power to fulfill small desires. You might find it easier to acquire money or desired objects. Things you've just thought about might be gifted to you, or situations you've fantasized about might suddenly materialize. Of course, this can be a hindrance to spiritual practice. It becomes a temptation, so the path of elevating this chakra is a cycle of achievement and temptation. For instance, when you reach Swadhisthana, people who were never popular before might suddenly become attractive to others. This is like a reward, but it's also a temptation. If you indulge in it, you might regress or be unable to progress further. If you overcome this, you experience the fulfillment of desires I mentioned earlier. It's a reward, but you mustn't become attached to it. If you do, you'll stop progressing. This pattern repeats itself. And this abdominal chakra is closely related to snakes. When this chakra is developing, you might feel a sensation like something twisting around your navel. In dreams or meditation visions, you'll often see snakes. If you have virtue, you'll see white snakes. If you lack virtue, you'll see unpleasant snakes. In any case, you'll frequently have visions of snakes. This chakra is also associated with vision. People who are very attached to visual things, those who love looking at or creating art, can be said to be stuck in Manipura. This isn't necessarily good or bad, but if you're too attached to it, it becomes difficult to move beyond Manipura. As this chakra develops properly, your eyesight may improve. People with poor vision might see some improvement. Someone with 0.01 vision might improve to 2.0. Well, maybe not that much, but there will be some recovery. So when the navel chakra is purified or filled with energy, our visual abilities tend to normalize. When advancing in meditation, we need to develop our internal senses, an inner eye, inner ear, and so on. These need to be developed, and as the Manipura chakra develops, this internal vision starts to develop. The person begins to see various things. This is also a point of danger. If the Manipura has developed but the mind is impure or lacks virtue, strange things may start to appear. This is like becoming what's generally known as a psychic. The world of Manipura is the realm of lower spirits, hungry ghosts. So people who get stuck here are prone to entering dangerous spiritual territories. However, to put it another way, everyone passes through here, so it's important to be careful during the Manipura stage. In other words, as the abdominal chakra develops, visual abilities increase, but at the same time, this can lead to seeing strange things. If the mind isn't properly purified, it's easy to enter dangerous spiritual realms. You might start seeing evil spirits here and there. There are two cases where strange things might be seen. First, these things might not actually exist, but they appear because the person's mind is impure. Second, these things might actually exist. Spirits and deities are everywhere around us, we just can't see them normally. As we start to see them, the level of the world we can perceive depends on our spiritual state. So if someone with a very high spiritual state develops their abdominal chakra, they might start to have wonderful visual experiences like seeing light or visions of deities. I remember when I went to the Himalayas alone for spiritual practice, I could see deities spread across the entire Himalayan sky. If your channel or consciousness aligns with it, you can see it. Of course, first you need the ability to see. It's like needing a TV set. Then you need to tune into the right channel. If you tune into a higher realm, you'll see things from higher realms. If you tune into lower realms, you'll see lower spirits. Of course, if you have complete mastery, you can see whatever you want whenever you want. Usually people tune into a particular channel, so even if you've developed the receiver like a TV, if your level is low, you'll only see strange things. You should stay away from people in the spiritual world who talk about such things all the time. Think about it. It can't be pleasant to always see such things. So if you truly want to walk the path of truth, you mustn't step into such worlds. This world is not just about psychic visual abilities, but it's also an entrance to the spiritual world in general. It's also the entrance to experiencing what's known as bardo, the after-death state. As this chakra develops, you might gain the ability to experience the after-death world while still alive. But again, as I've said many times, where you go depends entirely on your spiritual state. It's it's not random at all, it's completely determined by your spiritual state. Buddha often used words like bond or chain. Even though we can't see it now, we already have bonds determining where we'll be reborn in our next life after we die. There are usually several possibilities. For example, you might have a bond with hell, a bond with the animal realm, and perhaps a bond with heaven. Let's say you have these three patterns of chains. The bond with heaven might be weak, the bond with the animal realm might be a thin string, and the bond with hell might be thick chains wrapped tightly around you. When you die and your physical body disappears, you're thrown into bardo and you automatically go to the place you're most strongly bound to. The same applies to meditation and the spiritual world. When we step into the spiritual world, the realms we're connected to are already determined, so we only experience those worlds. This is determined by our spiritual state and virtue. So it's not just about visual experiences. When we step into the spiritual world without spiritual cultivation and virtue, we risk falling into dangerous realms. This chakra carries a significant risk of that happening. Even if this chakra isn't developed through spiritual practice, people who naturally have this chakra open are prone to spiritual experiences. They might easily experience sleep paralysis, hear strange voices, or see strange things. People who are prone to these experiences often have this chakra naturally open. This is the world of the Manipura chakra. And next up, let's talk about the Anahata chakra, right in the middle of your chest. This one is connected to the human realm in the grand scheme of things. Unlike the Swadhisthana we talked about earlier, the Anahata goes beyond mere sexual or romantic attractions and emits a deeper, essential charm. People whose Anahata is vibrating and purified are well liked and respected. You know those individuals who just exude charm and you think, wow, they're really captivating. Regardless of gender, you can find them among celebrities too. They are highly popular, but it's not necessarily about wanting to be in a romantic relationship with them. It's more like deep admiration and a strong sense of connection. That's the power of the Anahata chakra. In terms of desires, this chakra represents pride or the craving for recognition. It's like saying, hey, it's me. Conversely, as a flip side to that pride, one might become self-deprecating, thinking, oh, I'm nobody. Most of the time, people who say, oh, I'm nobody don't actually believe that. Deep down, they think, I'm amazing. Even though they hold this belief, they end up thinking, I'm nobody, because of their current situation. Without the pride of thinking they're exceptional, they would humbly work to improve. Furthermore, the Anahata chakra signifies compassion, love, and humanity, transcending mere sexual desires. Activated Anahata chakra leads to four immeasurables: loving kindness, compassion, and so on. Now, this might diverge a bit, but through dedicated practice and transcending limitations, the constricted chakra transforms into a larger one compared to an average person's. Why does this happen? Let's say the heart chakra is constricted. It tends to make someone highly emotional, excessively proud, or easily self-deprecating. It's like their nadis in the heart are narrow, but as they diligently practice and the energy flows through, that nadis widens. And what happens then? They may develop an immense sense of loving kindness towards others and gain a deep understanding of people's hearts. In other words, many positive qualities associated with this chakra shine through more prominently than in your average person. It's fascinating how yoga allows us to transform weaknesses into strengths in a way. Moving on, this chakra relates to the realm of tactile sensations. People caught up in this chakra fixate on skin sensations, prioritizing touch in clothing and items. This could be described as being stuck in your heart chakra. When this chakra is impure, there may not be an obvious cause, but physical pain or discomfort arises. Essentially, energy is flowing into this chakra, but impurities trigger unpleasant tactile sensations. However, as it becomes purified, you experience an incredibly pleasant sensation without any external stimuli, and this chakra corresponds to the element of air. At this stage, your appetite suddenly disappears. Sexual desire vanishes too. In other words, the life energy and flow of energy become centered around your body's vital activities. Simply by being alive, you can constantly experience ecstasy. It's a state where sexual energy has been completely sublimated and circulates throughout your body. Initially, it can be quite surprising during the early stages. As you get accustomed to it, though, it stabilizes. Perhaps initially, the unfamiliarity can make the intensity of ecstasy overwhelming. Your body becomes an ecstasy mass, with even slight touches triggering it. Thus, even reaching this point alone is quite blissful. And now let's talk about the Vishuddha chakra located in the throat. This one belongs to the realm of the element of ether, which represents the world of wisdom. It is said that when this throat chakra is developed, one gains access to the cosmic wisdom. understanding how the universe works and all that. And here's the thing about this chakra, it's all about power. It's different from the Anahata we discussed earlier, where everyone likes you but doesn't necessarily follow your lead. But those who have developed the throat chakra, people just tend to listen to them. It's not about being liked, it's about having that compelling authority. That's why it's called the power chakra. In the grand scheme of things, this chakra corresponds to the realm of asuras, which is a realm characterized by high intellect and power-oriented individuals. They have sharp logical intelligence, but tend to have a strong inclination towards criticizing others, wanting to attack and highlight their flaws. They possess a somewhat twisted sense of criticism, where they constantly find faults in others and think, I'm right, you're wrong. In other words, asuras have a strong sense of justice, but they can be quite idealistic. They conceptualize themselves as right and seek out others' shortcomings. That's the essence of asuras. Now, when someone gets caught up in the throat chakra, they become highly sensitive to sound. They're the type of people who find immense joy in listening to exquisite music. If they have a knack for it, they might even exhibit musical talent. On the flip side, when someone is energetically focused on the Vishuddha chakra, they become overly sensitive to unpleasant sounds, including everyday noises. They might have a keen ear, but they also find themselves saying, ugh, I hate that sound. It's unbearable. Like those people with perfect pitch who get extremely bothered if something's even slightly off key. It might be great for musicians, but it's safe to say they're caught up in the throat chakra. As the chakra develops, if it is impure, you may initially hear unpleasant sounds, like metallic noises, that aren't very pleasing. However, as it purifies, you'll start to hear flute sounds or very beautiful melodies. On the other hand, if the throat chakra is blocked, you may be more prone to middle ear infections or ear diseases. Additionally, issues with the semicircular canals can make you more susceptible to dizziness. Even their oral karma can affect this chakra. When there's a lot of unresolved karma related to speech and the world of sound, it gets stuck in the throat. After all, the karma of the mouth is essentially about words and the realm of sound. So when that karma clogs up the throat and ears, that's the world of the Vishuddha chakra. And now we come to the Ajna chakra, situated between the eyebrows. This Ajna chakra connects with the celestial realms. Those who reach the Ajna chakra possess not only virtue, but also the risk of arrogance born from that virtue. It's like the chakra of a king, commonly referred to as the crown chakra in English, although that term may have been used due to its resemblance to a crown. In reality, the chakra of a king resides within this space between the eyebrows. Wondering why this is the chakra of a king? Because those who fully develop it can become the rulers of the world. If this path is used for the greater good, it leads to becoming a wheel-turning monarch, a king who governs the world through the teachings of truth. The complete development of this Ajna chakra is one way to achieve the status of a wheel-turning monarch. However, when this power is misused, the person can become an emperor of evil, like a malevolent ruler dominating the world, or even a demonic lord of the heavens. Interestingly, if we look at it numerically, this chakra is the sixth from the bottom. The number 6 is symbolic of the demon Mara. Why 6? The sixth realm in the cycle of 6 realms is the heavenly realm, and the sixth world from the bottom in the heavenly realm is Mara's world. Hence, in a sense, this world operates on the concept of 6, where being the 6th, or even progressing to the 7th, leads to liberation. Those who are at the highest level of this cycle, rolling in the right direction, become the sacred kings who rule over that world. On the contrary, if they roll in the wrong direction, they become the demonic rulers who dominate the world. In the Bible, we find references to the beast with 666. I'm unsure if it's related, but whether tied to sacred or profane, this chakra appears to reign supreme. Also, let me share an experience from my past. During my middle or high school years, I practiced meditation in my own way. When I focused intensely on this Ajna chakra between the eyebrows, I started seeing a peculiar shape resembling elongated eyeballs. It puzzled me because at that time I had just started my self-taught practice and hadn't read much about yoga. I used to imagine the chakras as circular with petals blossoming like flowers, so I had imagined this chakra to be circular as well. However, it turned out differently. Moreover, in the center, I could see the Sanskrit symbol for Om. It amazed me, yet I found it to be an unusual form. Later, when I read yoga scriptures, I discovered that chakras differ in the number of petals they possess. Interestingly, the Ajna chakra has precisely 2 petals, just like what I had seen. Furthermore, each chakra has its own seed syllable, known as a bija mantra, often represented by the sacred Sanskrit letters. In this case, it was the Om symbol. Thus, this experience taught me that knowledge comes after the experience. So, it wasn't a mere illusion or a product of my imagination. If the experience came after reading the book, it could have been my own misconception or something I imagined. However, that wasn't the case. This realization made me understand that yoga isn't something created by someone arbitrarily. It's a discovery. It's a collection of various insights and realizations made by people in the past, which are now compiled. So, I believed that by following the same path, I could also make similar discoveries. It's similar to when someone tells you that there's a red Tokyo Tower when you go to Tokyo. Anyone who goes there can confirm its existence. Likewise, there are doctrines and teachings in yoga. The same applies to enlightenment in Buddhism, where reaching certain stages of realization often keeps the experiences undisclosed. Why aren't they revealed? One reason is that it helps the teacher gauge the student's progress. If the teacher were to reveal the answers at the beginning, the student might falsely claim to have experienced them. For example, suppose the teacher mentioned that during the final stage of liberation, 3 sun-like entities appear above the head, and the student, caught up in their own imagination, might have seen it as a misconception, conjuring it up in their mind, saying, "Oh, teacher, 3 suns have appeared." But it's uncertain whether it was the truth or just a misconception. However, by withholding that information, if the student comes forward and says, "You reached that stage without me mentioning it," it becomes evident. So many of the profound experiences at the advanced levels remain concealed or purposely left ambiguous. Even the way scriptures are written intentionally keeps things vague, withholding deliberate revelations. Therefore, please consider these points as well. And we have the Sahasrara chakra, situated right above your noggin, which we conveniently label as a chakra. But truth be told, it's not your typical chakra. It's actually the doorway to ultimate liberation, so it's in a league of its own. Sahasrara means 1,000-petaled, envisioning it as a grand lotus with 1,000 petals. So when we talk about chakras, we're referring to the Muladhara, Swadhisthana, Manipura, Anahata, Vishuddha, and Ajna chakra right between your brows. And in addition to those 6 major chakras, there are also these small chakras called Surya and Chandra. Now there are 2 theories about this. One theory suggests that Surya is located around the liver, around the right side of the abdomen, while Chandra is around the left side of the abdomen, spleen. Another theory states that Chandra is situated at the midpoint between the navel and the chest, like in the lower third, and Surya is in the upper third. Well, both theories are probably true. Instead of considering them as chakras, it's more like these energy channels with their functions. So you can think of them as Surya and Chandra, which exist at the midpoint between the navel and the chest, as well as on the right and left sides. To put it simply, let's start with Chandra. Chandra refers to the moon, but when we talk about Chandra chakra, it's known as the enigmatic chakra. If you get caught up in this one, you'll be dragged into some weird spiritual realms. Now, regarding the Surya chakra, it's the anger chakra. Anger exists in the Muladhara, the lowest chakra, but the anger in the lowest chakra is more like hatred. It's like holding on to grudges and resentment, having a lingering sense of hatred towards someone. On the other hand, the anger in the Surya chakra is more like sudden bursts of anger. It flares up, but it doesn't last long. Now, what happens to that sudden anger? As they say these days, it accumulates as stress in the liver. Basically, it's Surya chakra. So, Surya chakra serves as a reservoir for the energy of anger and stress. That's why people with active Surya tend to be quick-tempered. They may get angry easily, but it doesn't stick around for long. However, that accumulated anger can harm the liver. That's the type associated with Surya chakra. And it's not just about awakening and elevating our energy, we also need to work on purifying the chakras themselves. For example, people with strong anger tend to have energy rising from the tailbone. Essentially, this means converting the energy of anger into sacred energy and raising it up. This process involves purifying the Muladhara chakra. It's about transforming the part used for anger into non-angry energy. There are cases where this purification is done thoroughly and cases where it's not given much importance, like just letting the energy rise. What I mean is, when our energy rises, our consciousness goes to a higher realm. But what happens when it goes down? When it goes down, our consciousness becomes lower. For instance, even if the energy drops to the tailbone, some people become extremely angry, while others become slightly irritable or malicious. That indicates the impurity level of the chakra. It's not just about raising the energy, but the ideal state is when the energy drops and the chakra remains completely clean. That's complete purification. However, in the pursuit of quick liberation, one may be willing to overlook some impurities and jump up, even if there's some impurity left. If they're never coming back here anyway, it doesn't matter. But the thing is, we don't know that for sure. Various things can happen, and our energy might drop again. In that case, we may get entangled in lower suffering once more. Hence, complete purification. An easy to understand example is complete anger purification, where one doesn't get angry at all. Some people, for instance, won't get angry if they're called an idiot or a fool, but if they're called ugly, they get angry. That's their anger capacity. However, if they become unbothered by being called ugly, their capacity expands a bit. It's like that for every aspect. By overcoming each one step by step, the chakra's capacity expands. Ultimately, it reaches a state of all clear, where everything is purified. Kundalini Yoga has a sort of process, but it doesn't follow a straightforward path like this happens, then this happens, and then this happens. It's not that easy to grasp. For example, progressing from 1 to 4 doesn't guarantee reaching step 5. You may return to 1, or let's say there are processes A, B, and C. Instead of completing process A and then moving on to process B, sometimes A and B progress simultaneously. It can also happen that for some people, process B advances ahead of process A, so it can be quite confusing. And then there's the repetition of the same process multiple times, like a spiral staircase. For instance, let's say there are processes associated with the directions north, east, south, and west. You go through them as north, east, south, west. But then, on the next floor, you go through north, east, south, west again. So even if you thought you finally reached the realm of the south after going from north to east, when you arrive at the north on the second floor, you're like, oh, here it is again. But it's like a level up from the previous experience. It means that even after ascending once, you have to descend again and undergo even deeper experiences. In other words, the same process is repeated, but each subsequent repetition becomes more intense and yields deeper experiences. The human body has 3 main channels, left, right, and central. First, there's a central channel called Sushumna that runs along the spine. Then on either side of Sushumna, there are the right solar channel and the left lunar channel. Most of the countless channels circulating throughout the body can be broadly classified as either right or left. And as for their nature, the right channel is associated with the sympathetic nervous system, which means it's the channel of heat, energy, or excitement, often referred to as the solar channel. On the other hand, the left channel is related to the parasympathetic nervous system, which means it's the channel that calms the mind or cools the body, often called the lunar channel, and this aligns with the energy theory of yoga, corresponding to Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva. In Hindu cosmology, there's this idea that these 3 energies, Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva, intertwine and form the entire universe. So you could say that the entire universe is divided into these 3 energies. Rajas represents the energy of heat or intense movement, while Tamas represents the energy of darkness, the ignorant energy that conceals everything. On the other hand, Sattva represents the energy of light that illuminates everything. These energies play a role in everything, including the human body. When it comes to the channels we discussed earlier, the right channel corresponds to Rajas, the left channel corresponds to Tamas, ignorance, and the central channel corresponds to Sattva, the channel of illuminating light. Furthermore, these 3 channels correspond to human afflictions, attachment, anger, and ignorance. In this context, the right channel represents the channel of anger, the left represents the channel of ignorance, and the central channel represents the channel of attachment. The obstruction of channels and mental impediments can be resolved through 2 methods, elimination and utilization. Firstly, elimination is the conventional approach of discarding obstacles. In the case of eliminating ignorance in these channels, acquiring wisdom is essential. Traditional teaching methods are effective in this regard. Ignorance refers to a state where the mind is completely controlled by erroneous information, lacking wisdom or correctness. It's merely experiential or factual data. Being manipulated by something that is nothing more than data and believing it to be the truth confines us. Therefore, breaking free requires the incorporation of accurate information. That's where teaching comes in. By earnestly learning, it's better to focus on a narrower range of subjects rather than a wide array. You see, ignorance itself is formed through repetition. It doesn't mean not knowing, but rather being educated erroneously. Education, in this context, extends beyond childhood and encompasses the accumulation of various experiences throughout many lifetimes, during which misguided information, such as happiness lies in this way, becomes deeply ingrained. Hence, it becomes necessary to implant thoroughly accurate information to counteract that, and then engaging in contemplation with proper teaching. This is crucial because initially we are ignorant and incapable of deep contemplation. It can be perilous to contemplate in an ignorant state because ultimately, contemplation involves assembling information. When someone claims to have their own thoughts, it's rather implausible. What does having your own thoughts mean? It's merely a matter of the percentage of information one possesses. If a particular amount of information accounts for 2/3, it leads to a conclusion that appears dominant, and saying, "I think this way," is merely being influenced by that information. Ordinary individuals who rely on information as their foundation for reasoning are bound by the quantity of information they possess. It's a predetermined outcome. If there is an abundance of incorrect information, one can only reach incorrect conclusions. Thus, even if you contemplate at that stage, you'll arrive at erroneous conclusions. Therefore, to engage in correct contemplation, there must be an equal balance between accurate and incorrect information. With a greater proportion of accurate information, the likelihood of reaching correct conclusions increases. Now, you might wonder if it's necessary to refrain from contemplation until the mind is truly filled with accurate information. Well, that's not the case. However, in this instance, contemplation refers to contemplating when the conclusion is already determined. So, you must never jump to conclusions by yourself. In essence, what matters is how you use well-established reasoning in arriving at a conclusion to convince yourself. Take the 4 foundations of mindfulness, for example. The conclusion is predetermined, which is the observation that the body is impure. Therefore, one contemplates how to perceive the body accurately. These types of contemplation are carried out initially. So, through the repetition of such teachings and contemplation, this pathway of ignorance on the left side undergoes a purification process known as renunciation. Of course, this is a very conventional statement, and in reality, such teachings and contemplation alone do not purify ignorance. The reasons people fall into ignorance can include, for example, telling lies, engaging in trivial chatter, procrastination, a lack of punctuality, attempts to conceal various matters, and more. In those cases, ignorance intensifies. To counteract this, the opposite must be practiced. For example, if someone lies frequently, they should undergo training to stop lying. If they have a habit of not adhering to decisions, they must rigorously train themselves to stick to their decisions. Similarly, if they tend to be late or desire to quickly finish tasks, they should train themselves in the opposite behavior. These are the teachings of eliminating ignorance. Next is the path of utilizing ignorance. It means following gods or masters by becoming ignorant. That's the nature of the left channel. It's like using that nature and transcending ignorance. You see, the world we know is very limited. That's the wisdom of ignorance, like Socrates' wisdom of knowing that he knows nothing and surrendering to it. It's about willingly embracing ignorance in a positive way. Well, even without mentioning the purification of the left channel and all that, it's naturally an essential element in spiritual practice. In the realm of spiritual practice, it's quite a challenge without the fundamental mindset that I'm lacking in wisdom. The reason this idea is essential is that if you're clinging to your own perceptions and thoughts, you won't be able to dismantle your own world. For example, even if you read Buddhist or yoga books, you'll try to understand everything within the limits of your own concepts and intelligence. Understanding within the limits of your own intelligence means you can't expect anything beyond that. So, humility is required, like saying, I am ignorant. And the right channel is the anger channel. When energy enters the right channel, the body gets all fired up and energetic, but mentally it tends to make you a bit irritable. So first is the path of letting go. Anger is the issue with this right channel. So it's important to firmly instill in yourself the drawbacks of anger or the benefits of not getting angry. Alternatively, loving kindness, bodhicitta, learning such teachings and nurturing them properly, and then practicing in real life by loving people you dislike or training to love those who harm you or engaging in compassionate meditation. Just doing that kind of practice will purify this right channel. Now let's talk about the utilization. It's about using anger, which is heat energy, and harnessing that heat energy in reverse. This is known as the path of yoga. If you engage in these methods, all the channels in your body will be purified, but especially the right channel will be purified. So if there's someone who is primarily focused on these methods, the energy will concentrate intensely in the right channel, and that's how the purification happens, mainly in the right channel. Therefore, if someone feels a sense of blockage on the right side, one method to break through that is by practicing these methods thoroughly. And the middle channel. It is the channel of attachment, as I said. Attachment is basically intense focus. So when that attachment, that intense focus, is directed towards something negative, it ends up clogging one of the chakras. Therefore, the path of letting go in the middle channel involves discipline and the practice of abandonment. First, you need to cut off the attachments that bind you down below and gradually let go of the attachments within yourself, or firmly adhere to the discipline. Now here's the question. When you remove the desires for worldly things from attachment, what remains? Focus remains. What I mean to say is, in a sense, extreme attachment is like samadhi. For example, imagine a child who is completely absorbed in playing a video game, so absorbed that they can't hear their mother calling them for dinner, even with saliva dripping from their mouth. They are fully concentrated, completely engrossed, and oblivious to everything else. That moment can be considered a form of samadhi. However, it's not about the object of focus being negative. The focus itself is okay, so you let go of the worldly attachments that pull your focus downward, and what remains is just focus. Now, the method of sublimating the middle channel is through spiritual concentration on higher realms, and Bhakti Yoga is precisely the spiritual concentration on God or the sacred. So redirect the feelings of attachment toward God. Instead of suppressing attachment, channel all that intense focus or emotion toward God, every bit of it. That very heart of attachment, or rather the energy itself, is enhanced in reverse and directed entirely toward God. This becomes the path of utilizing the middle channel in reverse. This is the discussion about the middle path. The process of Kundalini rising up the back has a preliminary stage called the ascending Apana energy, and then the Kundalini ascends in earnest. First, it breaks through the knots located around the waist and behind the chest, while the energy rises. The internal processes are the same for everyone. However, how it manifests in the physical or mental aspects varies among different individuals. It can be quite different from person to person. For example, there are expectations that something must happen at this stage, but there are cases where it doesn't. In reality, the energy should have progressed this far, but the expected phenomenon doesn't occur. However, it's not a significant issue. What happens there is like a barometer. In an orthodox pattern, the body initially becomes hot, sweating occurs, shivers arise, and then levitation happens. This is the initial process when Kundalini rises up the back. The process of Kundalini rising has stages, and initially it's called the heat Kundalini, where a fiery Kundalini rises, making the body very hot. Depending on the person, intense sweating can occur. Among the levels of Kundalini, there is an advanced form called the wind Kundalini, which generates cold energy, and it also rises at times. Such variations exist, but initially, the heat Kundalini is generated, and shivers occur. This essentially means vibration. This signifies the energy rising. However, when there is still a blockage, naturally the energy tries to forcibly ascend, resulting in vibrations. Once this occurs, the vibrations lead to floating, or rather jumping up. Speaking from personal experience, when I was in high school and practicing mudras, there were situations where my body suddenly floated. But at a certain point, the switch got stuck, and it became quite literal. When I straightened my back, the switch would flip, and my body would start jumping. I would jump whether I was standing, sitting, or even when I was asleep. Well, while asleep, it was more like my body was undulating rather than jumping. So there was a period when it was a bit challenging to carry out daily activities. During that time, I was working at a company in Toranomon, Tokyo, where I was responsible for managing the company's overall computer systems. I had my own room, and since there was no one around, I would keep jumping. However, it's not something that can't be controlled. It can be suppressed with willpower. So I would fly around in my room but keep it in check when I had to interact with my superiors. But sometimes I would let my guard down, and that's when my heels would go like this. At that time, there was this wild, fiery energy trying to ascend somehow. However, since there was still a blockage, it resulted in a state of restlessness. Then, when it reaches a slightly higher level, when Brahma Randhra fills with energy at the center of the head, the body becomes light, and that's when it starts floating. It's hard to describe it other than as a sensation. The former, when Kundalini forcefully pushes and makes you float, feels like being propelled. On the other hand, when Kundalini gathers in the head and you naturally float, it feels like a gentle floating sensation. This subjective experience can't be precisely explained, and not everyone undergoes it. It's just one phenomenon that occurs in accordance with the energy process. However, if you do experience it, then it serves as a barometer, so to speak. When the Kundalini rises up the back, there are knots that act as barriers. The location of these knots actually varies a bit from person to person, but generally, they are found in the lower back, the middle back, and the back of the head, each named after the gods Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. The Brahma knot is located around the back of the belly button. So, having this wall here means that our energy mostly stays within these three lower chakras. These lower three, the first one being the anger chakra, the second one being desires like sexual and affectionate desires, and the third one is about money and food. In other words, our world is mostly limited to these aspects, being angry, seeking affection, and pursuing money and food. So as long as we don't break this Brahma knot, we remain bound to the material desires associated with this mundane world of anger, affection, desires, appetite, and money. And as long as we're trapped there, we can't find true happiness. We're left with only illusory happiness. We won't even come close to the truth. So first and foremost, we need to break this knot somehow. To put it a bit harshly, if we don't break it, our so-called practice will just end up as mere play. Ending up as play means we won't easily enter the realm of authenticity. We'll only learn various teachings without any real change happening within our hearts. That's why we need to break the Brahma knot first. And this varies from person to person, but for those who have a strong blockage, they may actually feel pain or discomfort in the area around their waist. Just think that it's precisely this knot that's causing the blockage. However, feeling a blockage indicates it's trying to open up, a positive sign. The rising energy meets this blockage. That's why it can be painful or feel uncomfortable. First of all, if the physical negative actions or physical attachments are too strong, the blockage of this knot also becomes stronger. For example, physical negative actions involve using the body for stealing, adultery, killing, violence, and various other negative actions like that. And through those actions, the blockage of the Brahma knot becomes stronger. Another factor is attachment to the physical body. Over-attachment to the physical physical body causes blockages. So on the flip side, practices involving the physical body, like pranayama, mudras, or serving others, purify our bodies. And as this blockage starts to break, it reveals the world behind the navel chakra. The navel chakra is the gateway to the spiritual realm. So, combining this with what I mentioned earlier, although we are bound to this material world by breaking the Brahma knot, we begin to enter the spiritual realm, so to speak. Now let's talk about the Vishnu knot located at the back. Basically, we're referring to the area around the heart when we say the back. This heart is deeply connected to the innermost part of our being. It means that concepts, misconceptions, or in other words, negative notions, wrong beliefs, and incorrect perspectives can clog this area. In essence, we have plenty of mistaken notions about how things should be in their most basic sense, or how we should feel pain or joy under certain circumstances. These misunderstandings are what clog this knot. Now, it's important to raise our energy levels, but at the same time, we need to consistently shatter these mistaken notions. The best approach is through teachings, by learning and living according to those teachings. To put it simply, let's say there's someone who tends to get angry easily. In the past, it was natural to react when treated a certain way. However, the teachings say that we must always love the other person. Everything is our own karma. Isn't that a complete change in mindset? It's about accepting that and saying, I won't get angry. In this way, we transform our thoughts into correct ones. By doing so, the knot in the back will break and we'll enter into a deeper world. And then, the Shiva knot at the back of the head is related to the brain. The realm of the brain is the world of imagination. Thoughts and imagination are a bit different. For example, the world we see in dreams or the images that come to mind spontaneously, those are imagination. So when these images contradict our thoughts, it creates a conflict. Let me give you a straightforward example. If you watch kung fu movies for about 20 hours straight, even though you might be thinking about something sacred in your heart, images of fighting will still come up. Those are just images, and these images can be quite dangerous. They can change our hearts and even influence our actions. So, whether it's television, comics, or even daydreaming, people who have been wounded by images, their channels get blocked. When we say these images are impure, it means they are not sacred, they're worldly. On the other hand, those who have a lot of fixed ideas, their channels get blocked at the back. And those who have committed many physical wrongdoings, their channels get blocked at the waist. Of course, everyone has some level of blockage, but the degree of blockage varies depending on how they live their lives. So, we need the opposite images. We need to repeatedly visualize sacred images. That's how we purify the images. It's like removing these knots and making the channels clear. In essence, it involves meditating on God or practicing compassionate meditation, consistently envisioning sacred imagery, or seeing the world as a divine mandala, all to purify one's imagination. And that's how the knot at the back of the head can be broken. Based on my experience, when the blockage at the back of the head is released, it makes a loud bang sound. And sometimes when the head is blocked and energy hits it, some people's heads jerk backward. Of course, there are also times when you simply feel, oh, there's a blockage here, without any intense sensations. That's the pattern when the head is blocked and it feels painful. So it's like breaking through the Brahma knot, then the Vishnu knot, and then the Shiva knot, and then the energy concentrates in the Brahma Randhra. The percentage of knots being broken varies from person to person, like some might have broken 50% or 80%, so it's not 100% clear cut. But when the energy really gathers in the Brahma Randhra at the crown of the head, which varies for everyone, some people start experiencing all sorts of mystical stuff, some even faint. Fainting happens when you're meditating and suddenly faint. It occurs when the energy rushes too intensely to this area and you're not used to it yet. It used to happen to me a lot when I was in junior high or high school. I think it was because I was still young and I was doing various practices with fervor. I would suddenly realize I fainted. I would come to and think, why am I on the floor? And when I retraced my memory, I had passed out right before going to the bathroom. When the energy rushes too abruptly like that, it can lead to such a state. Or sometimes you don't faint, but you momentarily lose consciousness while doing something ordinary. That happens too. So that's when the energy starts gathering in the Brahma Randhra. In various yoga scriptures, it's written that this is the end, but in the grand scheme of things, it's just a fraction of the whole accomplishment. It's a milestone, but still just the beginning. The beginning means we finally reached the first stage. And let me tell you, this part is actually quite easy. If you're practicing diligently, this part is relatively easy. In essence, the Kundalini rises through the energy pathway called Sushumna within this spine, and as the knots are gradually untied, the energy gathers towards the Brahma Randhra. It should progress up to this point. If you're following the discipline and teachings, accumulating virtues, and firmly practicing asanas, pranayama, mudras, meditation, and so forth, this part is easy. That's the path to the Brahma Randhra. So, the next thing is, Kundalini has awakened, but it's not rising easily. This is where you gotta have a positive mindset. The ascent of Kundalini energy and positive consciousness go hand in hand. They have a direct correlation. I mean, they can both be the cause. In other words, when the energy rises, you become more positive. And by forcing yourself to be positive, you can actually stimulate the ascent of energy. If your energy is on the rise, you'll become more positive. But if you're stuck in negativity, make an effort to be positive, even if it's uncomfortable. That way, you can create the conditions for it to rise. So sitting around moping and saying, I'm no good, or I'm worthless anyway, that's not going to make the energy shoot up, because once it rises, you'll definitely become positive. That's why it's important to always strive for a positive mindset. And if we're always thinking about gods or saints, naturally, the energy will rise upwards. That's like the secret of Bhakti Yoga. It's like focusing our consciousness on the enlightened beings who have reached elevated states and letting them pull us up. That's another key to ascent. And then there's practice. Practice is more of a physical approach. In this modern era of declining energy, we should definitely utilize practices. Of course, relying solely on practices won't cut it, but in today's world, incorporating practices as a component is essential. So let's make sure to do our practices properly. And then there's walking. From a Kundalini Yoga perspective, and even modern medicine says the same thing, the calves are referred to as the second heart. It means they pump and circulate blood throughout the body. So, through walking and similar activities, the power of the calves facilitates the circulation of blood throughout the body. In terms of energy, the movement of blood and the flow of prana are interconnected. So when energy is declining, walking can quickly raise the energy from the legs and lower body. So, next up is the lotus position. By sitting firmly in the lotus position, you can raise the energy from your lower channels upward. The lotus position is highly recommended in yogic scriptures as well as in Buddhist texts. However, in reality, many people don't give it much importance. Even Tibetan monks and practitioners of yoga in India, Japan, and the West don't emphasize the lotus position too much. But based on my own experience and studying the scriptures, I believe the lotus position is indeed crucial. It's advisable to practice it properly, and there are significant benefits to sitting in this posture daily. Now, one key aspect of the lotus position is the downward energy, known as apana, which physically moves upward when you adopt this rigorous foot placement. This is one of the advantages of the lotus position. Furthermore, there are channels on the right and left sides of the body. Ideally, we should direct the energy into the central channel. To achieve this, it's best to position the heels firmly, as if they are pressing against the abdomen. This physical pressure restricts the flow of energy in that area, making it easier for the energy to enter the central channel. Additionally, make sure to engage your lower back and straighten your spine. When all these aspects come together, as I mentioned earlier, the downward energy loses its pathway, the side channels also lose their pathways, and the energy naturally flows into the central channel. By maintaining a straight spine, it becomes easier for the central channel to ascend. Here at Kailash, we encourage even beginners to sit in the lotus position as much as possible. However, some may find it challenging to sustain for a long time or may only be able to do it occasionally. In such cases, I recommend gradually extending the duration of the practice. Next up is the inversion asana. Like I've been saying, when you flip yourself upside down, the blood flow and the flow of energy follow gravity and head towards the top. At the same time, the energy flow also goes in that direction. However, the kind of inversion we do in modern yoga is different from what you find in ancient scriptures and such. It's a more contemporary asana. Nowadays, headstands are really popular in the yoga community, and while they're definitely beneficial, it's not advisable to hold them for a long time. They can be risky and have negative effects on the brain and eyes due to the sudden rush of blood to the upper organs. With the inversion asana, since you're bending your neck, there's no need to worry about that. It's safe. Not only is it safe, but it's also highly effective. This is one of the amazing asanas known as the mother of asanas. In yoga scriptures, it's recommended to practice this for 3 hours, but well, you don't really need to do it for that long. However, the inversion asana is excellent, so it might be worth doing it daily. Specifically, the one with legs straight up is called the shoulder stand asana. Technically, when you make a hook shape, it's called viparita karani. However, keeping your legs straight is more effective, but holding it for a long time is challenging. To extend the duration, alternate between slanted and straight positions. And the inversion asana is a purifying asana. What I mean is, it brings out the negative aspects of a person. It varies from person to person. Some people may feel pain in their lower back, which usually indicates some sexual impurity. Others might feel it in their shoulders or neck, indicating a more combative nature. For some, it manifests in the legs, which could be related to sexual or anger-related karma. There are also those who feel it in their abdomen, which signifies greed. And there are those who experience chest pain related to pride, the desire for honor, or a human sentiment. So, depending Depending on impurities, discomfort may occur in a specific area but usually fades with time. Additionally, it's great for the whole body and has a significant positive impact on the physical brain. It actually improves intelligence. From my personal experience back when I was in high school, and let me first clarify that the high school was an average kind of school. I entered such a high school, but I didn't like studying at all, so I never studied, didn't pay attention in class, and my test scores were usually at the bottom. Then one day, I felt a strong urge to do yoga, and during spring break, I practiced the inversion asana for 3 hours a day for about 10 days. After that, there was this test, not the final exam, but an unexpected proficiency test in all 5 subjects. And guess what? I ranked first in the entire grade. Keep in mind, I hadn't been paying attention in class, so there were questions I couldn't practically answer. For example, I didn't know any math formulas, but I somehow managed to solve them through analysis and intuition. That's how I made it through, and I became the top of the grade. So here's a really funny story. The teacher goes around calling each student, saying stuff like, "Hey, you did well," and then handing out slips of paper with each person's test scores, rankings, and all that jazz. So when it was my turn, the teacher looked kinda puzzled, didn't say a word, and just handed me the slip as if to say, "Did you even do anything?" So I was like, "Hey, what's up with this attitude?" But then I checked out that paper. I was the top in grades. I was like, oh my god. And even my friends were shocked. But my friends' words to me were not like, "You did well," but mystical. That's how it went down, my first ever top ranking in my entire academic life. And that's when I realized, damn, yoga is amazing. Who would have thought the inversion asana could have such a powerful effect? So, if interested, give it a try. Just make sure to take the same amount of time to relax in the shavasana afterwards. And speaking of effective techniques, we have mudras. The best way to uplift the energy is through mudras. Mudra involves firmly engaging the bandhas to physically force energy upwards. In practices like asana, pranayama, or qigong, there is a certain rising of energy. However, mudras specifically aim to rise energy. Mudras are the combination of different bandhas, and when we break them down into parts, as I mentioned earlier, the lotus position is effective for raising the energy accumulated in the legs. To raise the energy of Muladhara, we have Mula Bandha, where you tightly contract the anus, or Ashwini Mudra, where you repeatedly contract the anus. Then there's Shakti Chalani Mudra, which refers to various practices under the same name, but one method involves tightening the muscles around the genitals. Mula Bandha involves a firm contraction of the anal region, whereas Shakti Charani Mudra focuses on toning the muscles around the genital area. You can also do it vigorously, like Ashwini. This raises the energy from the genitals. Moving on to the abdominal region, we have Uddiyana Bandha, which involves lifting the diaphragm, or Agnisa Kriya, which involves contracting and expanding the abdomen. And as for the throat bandha, it's generally used for retention rather than ascent. It prevents the energy from rising through this pathway. The reason for not raising the energy directly is twofold. Firstly, mudras aim to channel the energy into the heart as you ascend. In yogic terms, the heart is the access point to the true self. So you need to open this gateway and concentrate the energy here. Secondly, rapidly raising energy can be risky, causing it to rush to your head. This means you should avoid abruptly raising energy from your throat. Also, the throat bandha serves another purpose. We have the central channel and the left and right channels. By firmly engaging the throat bandha, we guide the energy directly through the central channel without deviation. And let's not forget about Nabo Mudra. It's about pressing down to uplift. Simply pressing the tongue upwards creates a pathway. This facilitates the easy ascent of energy, creating a route. These are the detailed explanations of the segmented mudras, which form the foundation of mudra practices. Now, returning to the main point, dedicated mudra practice as the core practice effectively facilitates Kundalini energy rise. Next, the energy focused on the lower chakras breaks through the knots and rises upward. And when enough energy gathers at this crown, we enter a state known as bliss, which is the start of something like flipping a switch. This bliss, so to speak, is a joy of non-attachment, a joy detached from the worldly. It's like reaching a point where the world doesn't really matter anymore, and there's a bright feeling, like a burst of laughter. In my experience, the best way to express it is by saying joyful, not fun or pleasant, but joyful. It's when you detach yourself from the impurities you've been clinging to for a long time and a sense of freedom emerges. From there, this brightness arises. Now, this happiness, for example, is being able to enjoy yourself even when everyone makes fun of you. It's not about having a reason to be happy, it's just being happy. Even if you're made fun of, there may be a sense of pride being hurt, but it's completely unrelated. It's a bit challenging to convey, but in a completely unrelated context, you feel somewhat delighted. It's like being happy in a functional way, as if a switch of happiness in your mind has been turned on. Everyone, please imagine something that makes you happy. For example, imagine you got concert tickets that you thought were impossible to obtain. Ah, I'm so happy. Imagine that feeling continuing for a long time. That's the state of bliss. So, it's a bit of an excited state, but there's no suffering. When I first entered this kind of situation, I would often experience terrible situations at work, like being insulted or spoken ill of, but it doesn't affect my heart at all. I don't think, I must endure this. It's more like feeling that I'm in a different world. However, this is not enlightenment. It's a passing phase in a certain period. It's just riding on temporary energy and raising consciousness, but it can serve as a barometer or lay the foundation for true enlightenment. So, when such a time comes, it's good to recognize that a certain amount of energy is beginning to gather in your mind and think, this is a good thing. The rise of energy, the flow into Brahma Randhra, and the emergence of a state called joy, followed by the generation of a new energy known as Amrita, the nectar of immortality. In yoga and Buddhism, they really like using the term Amrita and talk about the state of Amrita, and it's often used metaphorically, but it's not just a metaphor. It actually exists physically. Just like Kundalini, Amrita is not something vague. It physically rises through the body as a sublimation of sexual energy. Similarly, Amrita also generates physically from here. In contemporary terms, it may be similar to endorphins or brain chemicals. It's not exactly the same, but it's close. In my various experiences, the orthodox experience is that there's a point called the Shiva Randhra, a little deeper than the Shiva knot, slightly above the back of the lower head, where the Amrita gently emerges. I think that's probably the main source of its generation. But it's not only there, it also emerges from slightly in front of the crown. It also emerges from a little deeper behind the forehead. Additionally, it emerges from behind the eyes or from the chakras. There are various points of generation for Amrita, and the experience of Amrita has 4 orthodox stages: ice-like Amrita, water-like Amrita, ecstatic Amrita, and radiant Amrita. So, in the initial stage, it feels like cold water. Sometimes you actually feel the coldness and sometimes you don't. Or sometimes you may also experience a sensation of liquid-like substance in your head. That's the initial stage of Amrita. And as it further awakens, it transforms into ecstasy. It's like a liquid substance that contains ecstasy and slowly generates here. It flows to various places, but when it further awakens, you start to visually see droplets of radiant light. You can experience these sparkling drops of light during meditation. That's the most subtle form of Amrita. Personally, I frequently experience ecstatic Amrita. Not only do I experience it frequently, but I can also generate it at will with the power of intention. It can spontaneously arise from various triggers as well. There was a time when it arose at every moment which was troublesome. For example, it would arise when looking at the sky, basking in the sunlight, eating something, drinking something, or even just through breathing. The way it arises is different every time, including the point of generation. Even though we use the same words like pleasure or ecstasy, the types of pleasures vary. To be frank, Amrita emerges when any kind of energy is absorbed. This system is capable of that. And when this system is functioning well, all stimuli, emotions, and internal and external shocks experienced in the body are transformed into delight and wisdom. Just a touch becomes ecstasy, or if something arises in the mind, whether it's sadness or suffering, if you focus on it deeply, it transforms into delight. The mind becomes extremely clear and gains a heightened state of consciousness, as if diving into a higher realm. However, even if you only practice without cultivating virtues, this ecstatic Amrita won't arise. It becomes a missing element. So, although a liquid-like substance resembling Amrita may arise in the head, if someone doesn't feel any pleasure at all, it means they lack virtues, and then they can't progress further. In fact, this ecstasy has significant meaning. In the process of Kundalini Yoga, we greatly amplify this pure and sacred ecstasy to attain enlightenment. But if someone doesn't feel any pleasure at all, it means they can't achieve the practice. That's why virtues are crucial in practice. So, you need to accumulate virtues diligently, starting from small. To put it simply, by following teachings, you can gather daily small virtues like speaking kindly and offering truthful advice. Gradually build these virtues, and when a chance arises, amass substantial virtues. Another aspect is to focus more on not squandering virtues. We shouldn't chase after trivial joys, as they are leaks in our virtues. However, I'm not suggesting we become extremely stoic. It's about gradually restraining the desire for unnecessary comforts. So, while we accumulate virtues, we also need to be mindful of not letting them slip away on a daily basis. Additionally, it's important to consider how we can receive blessings from Buddha or the divine. Virtues are something we build up for ourselves. Both aspects are necessary. By diligently accumulating both, they become our assets. Another aspect worth mentioning separately is loving kindness or bodhicitta. Based on my experience, I would recommend virtues, blessings, and loving kindness as the 3 key ingredients. With these ingredients, and through the repetitive practice of energetic methods, we can approach enlightenment accompanied by tremendous joy. And this Amrita, it falls forward, it falls in the middle, and it flows through all the channels. In other words, the channels, like blood vessels, flow freely throughout various parts of the body. So when Amrita is generated in the head, it permeates through these channels to different areas. It even falls in unrelated places. In the initial stage, it primarily falls through the channels in the front of the body. Now, the front channels have a gap in the middle, around the upper lip area, so by pressing the tongue upwards, it becomes easier for the Amrita to flow. Ideally, you want the Amrita to enter the central channel, but that's quite a challenging task. When it enters there, it's like becoming a saint. So, initially you go through the easier route, the front one, and when the Amrita purifies the world of chakras, that's when true chakra awakening happens. In spiritual or yoga practices, you often hear about chakras opening or activating, but true chakra opening and development in the real sense begins when Amrita is generated from the head and fills the chakras physically. Of course, chakras themselves are just a collection of channels, and even ordinary people use chakras normally, and if, for example, a person improves their heart in the general sense or overcomes some emotional blockage, there might be some purification of the chakras. But for true chakra purification, for the impurities of the chakras to be removed and for the inherent power and wisdom to shine, the system requires Amrita. And this extends not only to the chakras but also to the channels throughout the body. In the initial stage, you experience a drop or two of Amrita falling in empty spaces. It's like suddenly you feel good here, as if Amrita has fallen. It starts from such moments, but eventually it saturates the entire body. So it's not about where it falls, but rather about the whole body filled with the ocean of Amrita. It's the Kundalini energy rising from the bottom and the incredibly pleasant energy of Amrita descending from the head. From below, the Kundalini fervently burns upward, while from above, the Amrita continually flows abundantly. In other words, Amrita flows through the chakras and channels, descending all the way to the very bottom. Once it reaches the bottom, the flame ignites again, and Amrita is generated once more. It happens during meditation, and as your practice progresses, it truly starts to occur, and through this process, the channels are thoroughly purified. Now, where does the Amrita that reaches the bottom go? It doesn't go anywhere, it accumulates. It accumulates and eventually saturates the entire body with Amrita. When you reach this state of saturation, your body becomes a bundle of bliss. The initial ecstasy is like when everything is stuck and then suddenly it flows intensely through Kundalini or Amrita. It's like an intense ecstatic sensation. It's like being tickled. Imagine that sensation of being tickled but with added ecstasy. It's like, stop it, please, no more, kind of ecstasy. That intense ecstasy is experienced when the blockages are forcefully cleared. On the other hand, the ecstasy of being filled with Amrita is a bit more calm and, well, it feels like melting. It's a contradiction in words, but it's a quiet yet intense ecstasy. The stimulation is not strong, but the joy itself is very powerful. And through this, the entire body is purified, the channels become fluid, and both the mind and body become fluid. Speaking of being fluid, from my own experience, it perfectly matches the expression used in Indian scriptures. It's truly fluid. You may ask what that means, but the expression fluid feels just right, and as a result, the mind and body also become fluid. The fluidity of the mind means being flexible and free. From the perspective of Kundalini Yoga, all suffering, whether physical or mental, is caused by blockages in the channels. So if the channels are cleansed, all suffering actually disappears. And the fluidity of the body is an extension of the fluidity of the channels. In martial arts, for example, they may be aiming for that state. This is purely a sensory perception, but it feels like becoming a perfectly streamlined, soft-bodied creature. The lines are there, they're flowing, but it's as if there are no joints, no boundaries in the body. I've always been fond of martial arts, but since I started practicing yoga, I haven't focused much on it. However, if I were to master martial arts, I believe that fluidity would be essential, and as a result, the heaviness and restlessness in the body disappear, and the laziness and excitement in the mind vanish as well. So, meditation interruptions such as bodily fatigue, restlessness, mental lethargy, and heightened excitement all dissipate. I used to struggle with meditation until I began experiencing that state. For example, I often fell asleep or couldn't fully engage in meditation due to distractions. However, at one stage, as soon as I sat down, I easily entered the state. This is the stage of tranquility. In this state, the body becomes nearly imperceptible, drenched in bliss, feeling remarkably weightless, to the point where you might ask, where did my body go? It's a profound and transformative experience. It's not like when you're meditating and you think, my body feels light today. No, it's beyond that. It's completely gone. I can't feel it at all. And on top of that, it includes a sense of joy. It's a state filled with refreshing ecstasy. It's not enlightenment, but if an ordinary person were to experience this, they would probably mistake it for enlightenment. It's a state without any attachment, both mentally and physically. It's a very light and serene state. Once you enter this state of light tranquility, you've got it. It's like a click, and your body and mind become fixed. You don't need to make an effort to control distracting thoughts, and you don't fall into a dull state. It becomes a highly suitable state for meditation, effortlessly, so you can meditate as much as you want. It becomes the gateway to magnificent meditation. And through the power of energy, or rather through the saturation of energy, you enter a state called samadhi. However, this samadhi is just the entrance. It's often misunderstood, but samadhi itself is actually neither good nor bad. It's like releasing the limiter and just letting go. In various expressions of yoga and such, samadhi is often portrayed as the ultimate goal, but it's just the beginning. Ultimately, our energy must enter the central channels, but entering these central channels can be considered true samadhi. These central channels run from the top of the head, passing through the brain, throat, abdomen, and even down to the perineum, the middle pathway. It's not at the back or the front, but right in the center. Of course, you won't find it by dissecting the body. The Sushumna channel at the back is still somewhat understandable because it runs along the spine, related to the nervous system flowing through the spine. But this middle pathway, from a modern medical perspective, is incomprehensible. There are attempts to reconcile the yogic understanding of the human body and the contemporary Western medical understanding, and there are indeed some points of convergence. For example, the so-called chakras have significant concentrations of nerve tissue, so there are some areas of agreement, but they don't fit perfectly. Especially as we delve into more advanced realms, they become less compatible. This central channel in particular is exactly like that. You truly understand it only through experience. And normally, energy and consciousness cannot enter there. The practice is about finding a way to enter what cannot be entered. That's what the ancient sages were seeking. However, reaching this stage doesn't mean liberation. It's not liberation, but it's finally reaching the true gateway to the realm of the saints. Then from that samadhi, you attain the wisdom of emptiness, realizing that everything lacks inherent existence, and enlightenment in seeing things as they truly are. And you mix this with the intense ecstasy generated by Amrita, the nectar. This is what they call the blissful emptiness without discrimination, or in simpler terms, you realize that everything is empty while experiencing incredible bliss. It's like finding the emptiness within the midst of profound ecstasy. You come to realize the truth that within the ultimate realm of duality, there is indeed emptiness. At that moment, you perceive this world as an illusion, understanding that all pain, pleasure, likes and dislikes are interconnected. And what happens when we die is that, at the moment of death, all the energy flows into the central channels. Then, that energy enters the heart gradually, but the pathway to the heart is blocked, so it needs to be unblocked. In illustrations, it's shown as the left and right channels connecting to the central channel at chakra points. This causes the central channel to constrict. If this is not properly unblocked, the energy cannot enter there. However, it naturally untangles when we die. And when the energy actually enters the central channel, you first see a vision like smoke. In my experience, it's more like the distortion of space than actual smoke. It's a wavy, distorted vision. Then comes the shimmering vision, like a heat haze. After that, a firefly-like vision. And then you see a vision like a flame. After that, 4 lights appear and fill the space. First, everything is filled with a bright, refreshing white light. At the same time, white energy descends from above, and then it is filled with a dazzling, shining red light, while red energy rises from below. The red energy unites with the white energy in the heart, and all the energy and visions immerse into the heart. At that moment, you are enveloped in a sudden blackout, like being surrounded by darkness, and finally, you are enveloped in a transparent, radiant light, clear light. That's what happens. And at that moment, the process of death begins. This is usually a natural phenomenon that occurs when the human body reaches the end of life. But in Kundalini Yoga, you forcibly open the central channel and gather energy in the heart, thereby experiencing this process of death while alive. For example, in meditation, the ultimate state is called samadhi, but in another sense, it refers to death. In a sense, samadhi means entering a state of consciousness similar to that of death, even though the physical body remains. This is samadhi. And if you prepare it properly, what happens? You go through the process of death, and after the process of death, you briefly enter the clear light, and then you go through the reverse process and experience the process of rebirth while still alive. In other words, you are reborn while still alive. By practicing and changing our way of life day by day, we can gradually improve ourselves. However, there are no dramatic changes. For example, in Japan, there's a saying that if you eat and then immediately go to sleep, you'll turn into a cow. But that's inconceivable. In other words, without reincarnation, there are no dramatic changes. But death is an opportunity, both good and bad. When you die, you are temporarily freed from fixed karma, which means it becomes possible to fall from being human to hell or to become a god from being human. So, let's get back to the topic. Through this process of death while alive, your body remains unchanged, but you can undergo a profound karmic transformation. You literally get reborn. In other words, when you die and come back, you can become a different person. In other words, it's possible to undergo a dramatic dramatic change without crossing over death. However, it would be pointless if the dramatic change only led to becoming an animal. This is Kundalini Yoga's scary aspect when spiritual training is lacking. And as another process, we create a spiritual body called the Divine Incarnation, or manifestation of pure energy. It involves the fusion of Amrita, the white energy descending from the head, and the ascending energy of Tumo from the lower region. In other words, it's a combination of refined masculine and feminine energies within oneself, the merging of yin and yang energies, which leads to the sacred conception. Interestingly, this practice is common in Kundalini Yoga in India, Tumo Yoga in Tibet, and the Taoist tradition in China. Through this process, the sacred energy body develops. The Divine Incarnation by itself is just an energy body if you don't do anything. It's completely different from the astral body because everyone has it. The Divine Incarnation isn't about having normal limbs like hands and feet. It's an energy body, a mass of energy. However, it's a mass of freely flowing energy, meaning it can take any form depending on our imagination and energy training. So we can transform this sacred energy body into a favorable form, resembling a Buddha or deity, and imbue it with a divine identity. Therefore, the practice here involves both imagery exercises like mantras and visualizations, as well as energy cultivation. You can't have one without the other. If you only focus on imagery exercises without energy cultivation, it becomes mere fantasy. You won't achieve the Divine Incarnation. On the other hand, if you only cultivate energy without imagery exercises, you might develop the energy body, but it won't possess a firm and sacred identity, which increases the risk of failure. In other words, if your mind is impure, it may manifest in an impure form. For instance, if you've always been reading Dragon Ball, like the old me, and intensely immersed in it, the image could become deeply ingrained. If you practice with that image, there's a possibility of becoming something like Piccolo. That's why imagery is dangerous. Therefore, in addition to the energetic process of sacred conception within oneself, one should engage in arising meditation, where you constantly meditate on transforming yourself into a deity, or align your meditation with the corresponding mantras. This helps establish your Divine Incarnation's identity. Now, the journey ahead is quite extensive. First, we create one Divine Incarnation. Then, we need to multiply it. Ultimately, you can have countless Divine Incarnations. The process of multiplication is established through factors such as the four immeasurables, loving kindness, compassion, or the strength of your energy. By multiplying these Divine Incarnations, you can use them while still alive to travel through various worlds and explore different realms. This world, often referred to as the Buddhist concept of the 3,000-fold world system, consists of diverse worlds and elements within this universe. And the human body is considered a microcosm. The microcosm, which is parallel to the macrocosm, is composed of the energetic channels within our human body. Energy flows freely within our microcosm, the human body. Riding on that energy, Divine Incarnations can travel within us, providing us with experiences of different worlds, like hell, animals, hungry ghosts, asuras, celestial realms, or gods and Buddha's pure lands. We can also journey to past lives, future realms, or the realms after death. Through meditation, we can directly experience these otherworldly encounters. In the case of Kundalini Yoga, actively experiencing these dimensions of existence allows us to empirically understand the overall structure of the universe. It's not about learning through teachings, but rather gaining personal experiences and knowledge of various worlds. We're normally confined by this thing called a limiter. It puts limits on us, so we can only experience this limited world of ours. That's why our wisdom doesn't really grow beyond the common sense we've been taught since birth. But when that limiter is removed and we start experiencing different worlds, our wisdom expands and our perception of things gets closer to the truth. We also gain insight into our past lives and the world after death, not through teachings, but through experiencing the workings of karma, understanding the importance of living right, and feeling compassion for those who suffer due to their wrong choices. It becomes a genuine understanding, not just something taught to us. For example, if we were to descend into hell, we'd see the faces of those we've held grudges against, and that hatred would emerge. We'd be like, I can't forgive that guy, and we'd end up falling into hell, overwhelmed by anger. And when we realize it, we'd find ourselves being dismembered. After experiencing this multiple times, you start to understand that hatred is no good. It's not just a lesson, but a shocking experience that deeply affects you. It's the beauty of Kundalini Yoga. So that's how the soul comprehends it. Hatred was really futile, it says. And not just with other emotions, but through experiencing them, wisdom elevates. And having that limiter removed can be really scary if you're not used to it. Stepping into worlds you never expected, it's like experiencing something shockingly transcendent. In a way, it feels more real than this world because the limiter is gone. In this existence, our souls have only experienced a limited range of possibilities. Sometimes people use drugs to remove the limiter temporarily, like LSD or certain types of drugs that can temporarily temporarily remove the limiter. But that's a forced and unnatural method, so I don't really think it's good. However, when it happens naturally within deep consciousness, it becomes a more authentic experience. And in a sense, it feels more truthful. First, you become aware of the illusory nature of this world. You realize that what we've always believed to be true about this world is actually an illusion. So Kundalini Yoga is not just a means to liberation through energy, it's about gaining a lot of proper experiences to deepen our enlightenment and wisdom. That's the beauty of Kundalini Yoga. If each of you were able to fully develop your divine incarnation, in a sense, you would become immortal. The physical body dies, but the divine body remains, allowing you to travel to various worlds, or even inhabit different physical bodies in those worlds. That's the path to liberation in Kundalini Yoga. And then, ahead of us, there are two paths. One is to simply free consciousness and reach the state of liberation. The other is the complete purification of all channels. Our state of channels is akin to a pipeline clogged with debris, and we try our best to clear them. For example, liberation. Well, it's on the other side. We are on this side, but we need to clear the path to the other side. Once the path to liberation is clear, we just follow it to reach liberation. Then we wondered if any hole would be acceptable as long as it could be passed through. For example, let's say someone drills a very small hole. The narrow path leads to nirvana. This person has achieved liberation. However, please understand that this is just an image. As long as one's consciousness remains in that narrow domain, it is liberation. But if the energy shifts even a little, there will be a sudden transformation. And there are quite a few practitioners of this type. How do these people feel? They are saints when meditating or in a good mood. However, during the course of their lives, if their energy gets stuck in the other domain, they end up in a state no different from an ordinary person. But if this person thinks, I just want liberation, I don't want to be reborn when I die, so it's fine as long as I reach nirvana, then there's no problem. Even if it's small or narrow, they should protect this path and not worry about the rest, live and die that way. Then this person is in nirvana. If all they care about is their own salvation, it's fine to travel a narrow path. However, in this case, there are significant disadvantages. First, even if they succeed, it's not complete liberation. Well, there isn't just one type of liberation. There are various stages. Achieving nirvana means breaking free from the cycle of rebirth. However, it's somewhat unclear whether this entails a complete escape. Liberation in general terms means switching off. It means reaching the switch and turning it off. That's liberation. But this type of liberation doesn't last long. The switch turns on again, all by itself. And because of that, we return to this cyclic world. What happens when we return? That's the problem. In other words, impurities remain. And when we come back, the reality of impurities is there. In other words, once we temporarily achieve liberation and return, we start as impure beings again. So, this type of liberation is not essential. That's one thing. And the other thing is that the worst scenario is aiming for this type of approach and failing to achieve liberation. That's the worst outcome. If someone dies with impurities remaining, they will fall into a lower realm. And actually, that's one of the drawbacks of Kundalini Yoga. Complete purification of all channels, on the other hand, is not like that. In the earlier analogy of the channels, it means completely clearing the channels, making them completely clean without any stains. If this is achieved, it doesn't matter if the energy goes up or down, it will be fine. For example, in a common scenario, when the energy is rising, one feels very peaceful and good. But when the energy goes down, it becomes a miserable state, and various negative aspects arise. This means that impurities are still present. So the best situation is to clean everything from the bottom to the top, through all the channels. This is the ideal way, but it's not that easy to achieve 100% clearance. You can clear it to some extent, but there will still be some impurities left. So, how do we achieve 100% clearance? Well, first, let's understand what purification means. It starts with our own experiences. We purify the experiences we've had. Let me explain. For example, there are situations where we tend to get angry no matter what. And if we repeat this pattern over and over again, it becomes a habit. But through proper teachings, reflection, and practice, we learn not to get angry in those situations, to forgive others instead. That's when we gain enlightenment, realizing that it's better not to get angry even in challenging circumstances. And through this, our channels expand significantly. Now, since our experiences are limited, we start to perceive others' experiences as our own. We see that everyone is suffering in different ways, and their impurities are different from ours. Yet we genuinely care about others as if they were ourselves. We wish for their happiness as if it were our own, and we feel their pain and have a genuine desire to alleviate it. Let me give you an example. Suppose a friend is suffering from intense jealousy, really tormented by it. They're consumed by jealousy and going through a tough time alone. Now, when we see that, we empathize as if it were our own struggle. We truly understand how painful jealousy can be, and we wholeheartedly want to overcome it, thinking, how can we destroy this jealousy? Let's figure it out together. By doing this as if it were our own experience, we can make it our own, like we had that jealousy ourselves and we've overcome it, gaining enlightenment. In other words, it's like going through the process of accumulating experiences, realizing their essence, and doing it for many, many people all at once. In one lifetime, we make those experiences of numerous individuals our own. In an image, it's like creating a huge hole and ascending while carrying all those experiences, expanding our capacity and acquiring boundless wisdom. And this process, doing it over and over again, being reborn again and again, that's what Buddhism calls the Bodhisattva path. It's about being reborn countless times, expanding our channels in various worlds. And at the end of this path, there is the complete purification of the nadis. As a final conclusion, this state can be considered the ultimate destination in Buddhism, called the realm of non-abiding nirvana. In this state, there is no abode in this world or in nirvana. It means there are no impurities to stay in the cycle of rebirth, yet there is compassion, so one cannot remain in nirvana either. That's the deal. In other words, to put it differently, it's the complete purification of the channels, the nadis. It differs from the general nirvana and the cycle of rebirth, akin to reaching the ultimate Tathagata stage. Of course, it's up to you. For example, do you want to achieve liberation quickly in the future, or do you want to become a great being who can save everyone? There's this story about Swami Vivekananda and Ramakrishna where they talk about these things. To put it briefly, when Ramakrishna was seriously ill and close to passing away, his main disciple Vivekananda was anxious. He was worried and thought, I've met such a great master, but I haven't achieved anything yet. So, he worked desperately and practiced with all his might, and at one point, he went to his teacher, Ramakrishna, and asked him to give him the power to enter Samadhi freely for as many days as he wanted. Ramakrishna scolded him for saying such things. He said, "What are you saying? Are you still talking about that? How small-minded you are. I thought you would become a great being like a banyan tree where many suffering people can find shade and rest, but now you're only seeking your own liberation. Have some shame." He got angry. So Vivekananda understood the heart of his teacher, that his teacher wanted him to become not just a liberated saint, but a broad-minded bodhisattva who would embrace the suffering of many people and become a great ship to carry them. After realizing this, Vivekananda, in the period following Ramakrishna's passing, became a perfect example of the bodhisattva path. In Buddhism, the bodhisattva path is often mentioned. The theory behind it is excellent, but there aren't many detailed stories about the actual lives of bodhisattvas. However, Vivekananda's story is exactly that of the bodhisattva path. He only thought about complete salvation, giving himself completely and running around to save others. And by doing so, he burned out his life and passed away at around 39 years old. Going back a bit, it's about completely purifying your own nadis to the extent that you can bear the suffering of any person. That's the path of the bodhisattva. Kundalini is the energy that everyone possesses. However, it is usually dormant or not frequently utilized. In some cases, if it is misused, it can become the energy of worldly desires. Alternatively, if it awakens partially, one may simply become extremely selfish or suffer from worldly desires. However, by accumulating virtues and having faith in and surrendering to God, the source of the energy known as Kundalini, and by practicing self-discipline, Kundalini awakens. It ascends through the channel called Sushumna, located within the spine, breaking through the Brahma knot, then the Vishnu knot, and finally the Shiva knot. As Kundalini concentrates in the Brahma Randhra, it reaches a state called Ananda or bliss. Afterward, a new energy called Amrita, the nectar of immortality, is generated. The Amrita flows through the chakras and channels, descending all the way down. Once it reaches the bottom, the flame ignites again, and Amrita is generated once more. It repeats this process, saturating the entire body with Amrita. Beyond this state, it melts into a state called Samadhi, where one attains pure and unadulterated wisdom or experiences immense ecstasy. Life itself becomes an ecstasy. This is the ultimate goal of Kundalini Yoga. Furthermore, at a more advanced stage, one can create another self, either one or countless, arising from that energy. Through these manifestations, one can have various experiences. And by thinking of others as you think of yourself, wishing for others' happiness as you wish for your own, or feeling sorrow for others' suffering as you do for your own and wanting to relieve it, you can experience the lives of many people as your own, greatly expanding your capacity and acquiring infinite wisdom and tremendous capability. And by being reborn countless times and expanding one's channels in different worlds, one achieves the ultimate purification of nadis. Considered the pinnacle of Buddhism, it reaches the ultimate state of non-abiding nirvana, free from impurities to escape reincarnation, yet infused with compassion, preventing entry into nirvana. This encompasses all aspects of Kundalini Yoga.